Chapter 7, Ownership of Real Estate. In the last chapter, we were talking about estates and interest in property. This chapter, we can talk about ownership. Say if you have one owner or more than one owner. We're going to describe different forms of ownership. We're going to explain the differences between condominiums, cooperatives, and timeshares. And we're going to start off with tenancy in severalty. Tenancy in severalty, it comes from the root word sever, not several. So your interests are severed from all others. Tenancy in severalty is ownership by one person or entity. When I say entity, we're talking about businesses. Businesses can own real estate too. So tenancy in severalty comes from the root word sever. So you can see I got the line drawn through the word severalty. It's pronounced severalty, like several, severalty. But it comes from the root word sever, where your interests are severed from all others. It's sole ownership by one person or entity. That owner is free to devise the property to anyone they like in their will, or they can leave it to heirs or devisees that they name in the will. Now, so let's highlight that. Then they go on here to say if the owner dies intestate without a will, then the property eventually will escheat back to the state. If no, heirs step forward to lay claim to it. Okay. Now we have this on the next page here. We've finally got this. We've seen this image before that I've shown you. It talks about the root word, the easier way to understand legal terminology. It starts off with the root word, and then words that end in or is the person that's giving whatever the root word's talking about, or the product, like they're explaining here. And the words that end in EE is the one that's receiving it. So on this page, I'll have you write above the word giving in capital letters, OR in quotes. You probably should highlight it first if you're going to highlight it. Put the highlight there first and then write over it with your pen so it don't smudge. And then above the word receiving, write EE in quotes in capital letters, words that end in OR versus words that end in EE. Like the devise. Devise is what? When you leave property to someone in a will. So the devisor is the one who's leaving you that property in a will. The devisee is the one that's receiving that property in a will. Grants, we transfer our ownership by granting that ownership from one party to the next. So therefore, the grantor is the seller or the owner who's giving it or selling it. The grantee is the one who's receiving that ownership. Legacy is your personal property you've amassed during your lifetime. So you got the legator and the legatee. The lease, the person who gives the lease is the landlord. That's the lessor. They're the one that gives you the lease. The lessee is the one who receives it. Mortgage means the opposite of what you think it does. It's not a loan. A mortgage is a promise to pay. Banks don't make promises, they make loans. So the mortgagor is the one that gives them their promise to pay back, and the mortgagee is the one that receives that promise. So easier way to remember this one instead of trying to remember that a mortgage is a promise to pay. Banks don't make promises, they make loans. So therefore the mortgagor is the one who's giving the promise, the mortgagee is the one that's receiving it. Instead of remembering that whole long drawn out story, you could also remember that just the rhyme or the song, the mortgagor is the borrower, right? So the mortgagor is the borrower. My voice is falling out of me here. Me. The mortgagor. No, it's still good, still crappy. And I'm getting a little hoarse here. The mortgagor is the borrower. I can't even do it right. You guys got to sing for me. Come on. Who's the mortgagor? I can't hear you.
The borrower.
There you go, the mortgagor. There you go. Mortgagor is the borrower. That's the easiest way to remember it. Just sing it. The mortgagor is the borrower. All right. Instead of remembering the whole story, to remember who is who in the players here. Okay, so I made a chart similar to that, and in it I explain what a mortgage is. I put the whole explanation of what the mortgage is and what that promise is that the borrower is actually making to the lender. In a mortgage, the borrower is promising the lender, if you lend me your money, I'll pay you back according to the terms that we've agreed upon in the note. Because there's two parts of a mortgage itself. You got the promise to pay, and then you got all the financial terms laid out. And they get laid out in the document that's called the note. So the mortgage is the promise to pay. I'm giving that promise to the lender. I promise to pay you back if you lend me your money. And if I fail to pay you back, you can foreclose on me to take the property back, sell it at auction, and use the proceeds to pay off the debt. That's the actual promise that's being made. It is the mortgage that it is the note, however, that makes the borrower personally liable for the full amount they borrow. Okay, so the lease is when an owner of land intentionally conveys that property to a tenant for a limited period of time as defined in the lease. And the lease document sets forth all the rights and obligations of the parties, the tenants to the landlord to the tenant. And it is also the document that conveys the owner's rights to a tenant for a limited period of time, not just conveying the property, but all their rights in the property, except for the right to sell it and mortgage it, of course. They have all the rights, the right to keep others from entering the property, etc. That is included in the lease. That includes keeping the landlord out of the property because the owner of the property is turning over all those rights to the tenant. Just because they own the property, they can't now go into the property and use a key to enter into the house or apartment or whatever is being leased, right? You have the right to keep others from entering your land. So, look, lenders often misuse the term mortgage. And here's an example in this commercial. You guys probably seen this commercial. I think it's a LendingTree commercial. Or even lenders misuse the words in everyday English language.
Looking sharp, Len. Who's the lucky lady?
I'm going to the bank to discuss a mortgage.
See, you need a loan, you put on a suit, you go crawling to the bank. This is how I dress to get a mortgage. I just go to LendingTree. I calculate how much home I can afford. I get multiple offers to compare side by side. And the best part is, the banks come crawling to me.
Everything you need to get a better mortgage. Clothing optional. LendingTree. When banks compete, you win.
Okay.
Awkward.
Awkward. Yeah, so even in that commercial, you could see the LendingTree commercial. They said, "This is how you go to the bank to get a mortgage." Well, actually, you don't get a mortgage from a bank. You give a mortgage. In exchange, they give you a loan, right? So even the banks, the lenders are misusing this terminology in their commercials and advertisements. We know what you're talking about. We don't need to be sticklers about it. But here in the classroom, we do, because you need to use the terms properly for exams so that you understand what they're asking of you. To understand what a mortgage is, it's a promise to pay. Banks don't make promises, they make loans. Remember, we need to remember what these words mean. Otherwise, you're not going to understand what they're asking of you in a question. All right. So, tenancy and severalty, tenancy by the entirety, tenancy in common, and joint tenancy are the four types of ownership that we're going to learn about in this chapter here. We just learned that tenancy and severalty, the root word is sever, so your interests are cut off from all others. Your interests are severed from all others. So you are sole ownership by one person or entity. I'll give you a quick rundown real quick right now. The tenancy by the entirety is ownership between married couples. Tenancy in common is the default form of ownership when you have at least two or more people that are married to, two or more people. When you have at least two or more people that own a property together that are not married, typically, the default form of ownership they have is tenancy in common, unless they specify they wish to take ownership in a different form. And what is the other form that's left over? Joint tenancy. And you really have to be specific that you want to take ownership in this form. You have to specify at the time you're taking ownership that all the co-owners wish to take ownership as joint tenants. You have to have 4 unities in common to create a joint tenancy, which we're going to go over, and how to terminate joint tenancies. Now, the only benefit why anyone would want to create a joint tenancy versus a tenancy in common is because it comes with the right of survivorship. So that's the only benefit to a joint tenancy, is the right of survivorship. That means when one owner dies, the other surviving co-owners automatically equally split the shares of the owner who had died. So we'll be going over that right up next. First, let's put a little note here, because I'm going to teach you all about the differences between the different types of tenancy here, and you're going to study your little hearts out. But if you get a question on exam that asks you which form of ownership would you recommend that someone take ownership in, you don't do that because that's legal advice. So even if they have an answer option there that would fit perfect, you would select the answer option that said none of the above. It's a trick question. If they ask you a question in the form of, how would you advise they take ownership? Which form of ownership should they take? There you would say none of the above, even if though one of those answer options were the correct answer and you knew it, because that's legal advice and we don't give legal advice. However, we do need to be able to spot the different forms of ownership and know the differences between them. So if the question asks you which form of ownership would this be versus which form of ownership would you recommend, those are two different questions altogether. This is why you still need to know the differences. So let's do some highlights and do a little highlighting about tenancy in common. And let's write underneath that or next to it, it's the default form of ownership. When 2 or more people own property, they do so as tenants in common. It's the default form of ownership. When you have 2 or more people that own property, they do so as tenants in common. Now, an entity can own as tenants in common as well, meaning a business can also own a property with an individual or with another business. They could share that ownership. So when there's a partial ownership interest, you own part of it, someone else owns part of it. Tenancy in common is the default form of ownership. And in the tenancy in common, you could have unequal ownership shares. So it is impossible to physically distinguish which half or third of the property is owned by any of them. Tenants in common do not necessarily have equal shares. You could have one that's 75% owner and the other is 25% owner. However, if you don't specify in the deed that one person is 75% owner, one's 25%, then you're 50-50 if you don't specify it. Because by default, you're 50-50 owners if there's only 2 owners, right? It's equal ownership unless specified otherwise. But you can have unequal shares of ownership with this type of ownership as a tenants in common. Or in the commercial real estate world, they love their acronyms. They call it a TIC. So a tenancy in common, or a TIC, each owner can sell, convey, mortgage, or transfer their interest without the consent of the other co-owners. It's just a little bit difficult to do, though. And upon the death of a tenant in common, their interest passes to their heirs or devisees that they named in a will to get it. If a tenant in common wants to dissolve their co-ownership, but the other parties do not voluntarily agree to its termination, well, you're not stuck owning the property with them. If you tried selling your ownership shares, but were unable to find someone who's willing to buy your shares and become co-owners with another stranger, usually when you sell real estate, you sell all of it, right? So if somebody wants to just sell their ownership interest in a property that they have with someone else, that could be very difficult to do. And trying to recruit a real estate agent to help them with that, well, you got to be careful as a real estate agent. We could be breaking laws if we do that, because this could be considered a security. And to sell securities, you need to have special licensing to deal in securities. But this is a real estate asset, so you'll also need to have a real estate license. So you either have one person that has both licenses or two people involved, one that knows how to deal in securities, licensed to sell and deal in securities, and another one who's licensed to sell real estate. But if you're in an ownership with someone else, you can't sell your shares because you can't find someone willing to. You ask your co-owner to buy you out, but they don't have the money to, or maybe they just don't want to. Are you stuck owning that property with them? No, you're not. There's something called a suit. It's a partition proceeding. A partition proceeding is a lawsuit where one co-owner sues the other, forcing them to sell or divide the property if possible. It is a form of involuntary alienation because they don't want to get rid of the property, you do, and you're forcing them to, because you go to the court and you say, listen, Your Honor, I tried to sell my interest on my own. I was unable to. They can't buy me out or don't want to buy me out. I don't want to be stuck owning this property with this person. So my other only option, regretfully, is to see if we could physically divide the property so then it gets deeded separately and then I could sell my share solely to somebody. Or if that's not physically possible to divide a property physically, then the judge will order the property sold and each of the co-owners will get their proportionate shares according to their proportionate ownership from the proceeds of that sale. So in that regard, a partition is a form of involuntary alienation if you get it on exam as a question, which sounds like one of those exam questions could possibly come from there. Okay. Now, in New Jersey, a conveyance of two or more people not married to each other creates a tenancy in common, unless you otherwise state in the deed. So the tenant's shares would be equal also, unless otherwise stated in the deed. That's the second paragraph on the top of page 121.
So the joint tenancy, that's the one where they cannot leave it to heirs, right? They have to leave it to the co-owners.
Yes, we didn't get into that deeply yet, but yes.
Oh, okay. Thank
So
you.
we're about to go into that one right now. Well, after we go over my next slide, which talks about tenancy in common, of course. So I do my recap after we do our highlights. So I give you the basic rundown of a TIC here in this one slide, everything you need to know about a tenancy in common in one slide. It's a default form of ownership, two or more owners, people or entities not married to each other, automatically creates a tenancy in common, a TIC, unless otherwise specified in the deed that the ownership is to be taken in another form. Corporations can be a partner with a partial ownership interest in a property, either with another person or another corporation. Owners can have unequal ownership shares of interest in the property. Example, one can be 25%, one can be 75%. But if you don't specifically state that in the deed that you put up 75% of the cash and therefore you're 75% of the owner, it's going to be 50-50, no matter who put up how much money. So it's important to state that in the deed. Owners can devise their interest. That means to leave it in a will upon their death to their devisees. They could sell their interest without consent or permission from the other co-owners. However, this could constitute dealing in securities. That's why I got that note here again. Licensees must use caution when selling only a partial interest from one owner. It could be classified as a security, and you'd need to a special license to deal in securities. Actually, I don't even think that's anywhere here in the book. I think I just mentioned that just because of the knowledge that I have about it. So you would need a securities license to deal in that. You're a professional helping someone else sell only their partial ownership interest. I remember a while back, I had a commercial agent give me this article. It was like a 4-page article about IRS rules and how they're cracking down on real estate agents and companies that are selling partial ownership interests of real estate, which should be classified as a security and would require licensing to be able to deal in securities. You got to register that security with the state, the SEC, and the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. And you need to have this special licensing. I'm not sure which license is required for this, Series 3, 5, or 7 for this type of security. I don't know. But special licensing is needed. And owners have an undivided interest in the entire property. You cannot physically distinguish which part of the property belongs to who. So say that you and we're not married and we own a property 50-50 together, right? If you have 50% ownership in the property, you have 50% ownership in the entire property. It's not like we spray paint a line down the center of it. That side is mine and that side is yours. It's not the way it works. Okay, this ain't the Brady Bunch. Okay, what they used to do that with the bedroom with the clothesline. Old humor, I guess. You guys probably don't even know who the Brady Bunch is. Okay, so anyway, it's physically impossible to distinguish who owns what side of the property. You are 50% owner, you're 50% owner of the entire property, okay? Now, unless you buy out your partner's interest, they'll never own it in severalty. What does that mean? One person.
One person.
Right? So when the co-owner dies, or when the co-owner wants to sell and the others don't, you could ask them to buy you out or sell your interest on your own, which may be difficult, or you could partition the property. And then here's the definition for partition that I put together here. It's pretty much almost the same as what the book got. It's a court proceeding where one co-owner sues the others, forcing them to divide the property if physically possible or sell it. This is a form of involuntary alienation, which, remember, alienation is a transfer of property. They can be voluntary or involuntary. All right. If anybody wants to snap a picture of this slide, I'm waiting. No. And let me move my controls out of the way here. All right. Next up, we got a tenancy in commons, the default form of ownership unless you specify you wish to take ownership in another form. And what other form would that be but joint tenancy? I sometimes refer to it as the poor man's will. You'll see why in a moment. A joint tenancy is when you have two or more people, not entities. You see the note I wrote up here? It says two or more people. I drew the line, the arrow from people to up here where I wrote not entities. Corporations can never own as a joint tenant. And the reason being is two or more people can also choose to own property as joint tenants, because the main feature of joint tenancy is that it carries with it the right of survivorship. If one co-owner dies, the survivors automatically equally split the shares of the owner who died. It doesn't need to go through probate or anything like that. So, corporations, do they die? No. If a business is failing, corporations get dissolved. They don't die. So a corporation would always be the last man standing, so to speak, in this type of scenario. That's why a corporation can never be a joint tenant. Only a living human being can. Okay. So on the death of one joint tenant of the property simply means there's one less person in the group, and they automatically equally split the shares of the owner who died. So joint tenants must have equal ownership shares. If they don't, you know it's not a joint tenancy. Just by glancing at it, it's not a joint tenancy if they don't have equal shares. So eventually, as all the co-owners die, ownership is divided equally among the surviving co-owners until there's one last man standing, so to speak, and then they become a tenant in severalty, and then they could do whatever then they could leave the property by in a will. But up until that happens, where there's only one last person, one last owner standing, well, you got the right of survivorship. Nobody can leave it in a will to anyone. All right. So there are 4 unities required to create a joint tenancy, TTIP, the unity of time, title, interest, and possession. So to create a joint tenancy in New Jersey, language in the deed must expressly state that you wish to take ownership in that form. Because if you don't, the default form of ownership is what? When you got 2 or more people, 2 or more owners not married to each other?
Tenancy in common.
Tenancy in common. There you go. So there are 4 unities required to create a joint tenancy. You got a little acronym here to remember it. TTIP, the unity of time, title, interest, and possession. Even though in this version of the book, they mixed up the order, and it's not in that order of time, title, interest, and possession. They got time here, title here, then goes up to interest, and then possession. It's all mixed up. When they do the rewrite, I'm going to try to get them to put it in that right order again, because this acronym that we teach people to remember it in, TTIP, time, title, interest, and possession. Those are the 4 unities, the 4 things you have to have in common in order to have a joint tenancy. Now, once again, possession. What is possession? Well, possession is that just like with tenancy in common, if you're a 50% owner, you can't physically distinguish which 50% of the property you own. You own 50% of the entire property. Okay. So let's go over each one of these unities and see what they mean. Unity of title. All joint tenants must acquire interest by the same deed. Unity of time. All joint tenants must acquire their interest at the same time, that ownership interest. Unity of interest. All joint tenants hold equal ownership interest. They cannot have undivided ownership interest. And then you have the possession, where you can't physically distinguish, which part of the property is mine, which part of the property is yours. I have an ownership interest, whatever percentage that interest is, in the entire property. It's not that I own that corner over there. I own my percentage of the entire property. Everybody got that down and understand that concept?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll leave it up here in case you want to snap a picture with my notes and stuff on there, unless you wrote these notes and copied them over onto your book. Okay, so here we go. Joint tenancy. You got 2 or more owners, usually not married to each other. A corporation can never be a joint tenant because of its possible perpetual existence, that a corporation never dies until it gets formally dissolved, right? If the president or CEO of a corporation dies, they just replace that person with another person, right? And the corporation lives on. To create a joint tenancy, it must be specified in the deed that you wish to take ownership in this form at the time of the purchase. Otherwise, the default form of ownership for two or more people not married to each other creates a tenancy in common. The only benefit to having a joint tenancy is the right of survivorship, which once again is if one co-owner dies, the survivor or survivors automatically equally split the shares of the owner that died. This is why you cannot leave it in a will to your heirs. It's the only benefit of the joint tenancy. You specifically created it for that reason. So nobody can leave it to their heirs. That if you die, your co-owners split the ownership for whatever reason it is that you wanted to do that. You want any more information about that? Talk to your legal counsel. Can't give you any advice of business advice of what form of ownership you could take, because that's legal advice. Now, all owners must have equal ownership shares in the property. For example, 50-50. If there's four owners, or if there's two owners, it's 50-50. Three owners, it's 33 1/3. If four owners, it'd be a quarter, so on and so forth. All owners must hold an undivided interest in the entire property, where you can't physically distinguish which part is mine and which part is yours. Each owner can sell their interest without the consent of the other co-owners, but we know that that could be difficult to do. But if they do that, it kind of messes up the joint tenancy, because that new owner does not have the four unities in common. They didn't get their ownership at the same time or using the same deed. So that new owner will be a tenant in common. However, any existing joint tenants will remain as joint tenants. I'll explain it by showing you some pictures. I know some of us are more visual, so I got some pictures with graphs that I'll show you that'll make it easier to understand. So owners can partition the property if they want out and the others don't want to sell. They could still partition the property. That, once again, that would destroy the joint tenancy as well. And it is possible to be converted to a tenancy in common or tenancy in severalty. Yeah, if everybody dies, and you're the last man standing, so to speak, you would become the owner in severalty. Or if the owners sell off to new owners, well, then they would become tenants in common. So here is the joint tenancy. Okay, look, we got three owners with equal ownership shares. You see the pie image I drew here? You got three slices of the pie: owner A, owner B, owner C. They all own the property with equal shares. What kind of ownership is it?
Joint tenancy.
How do you know? Can you have tenants in common that all have three owners with all equal ownership shares? Gotcha. Okay, so that was a trick question. We're talking about joint tenancy, so naturally you'd mention joint tenancy. But the thing is, you could have tenants in common, three owners, all with equal ownership shares as well, and be tenants in common. But if I specify they're joint tenants, or if you ask me if they have the right of survivorship and I said yes, then you could be like joint tenancy. Okay? Kind of got you on that. It was a little trick question, but on purpose, because I wanted you to get a little learning lesson out of that. Okay. Now, say we got three owners, A, B, and C here. It is joint tenancy. What happens if B dies?
And A and C split the shares.
Right. So right there, right down the middle, right? A and C split the shares of the owner B who just died. Okay, I'm giving you some visuals now. I got the wording up top here that matches, but here's the visuals I'm giving you. So A and C split the shares of B who died. Now what happens if C dies?
Everything belongs to
A and B split it.
Wait, I thought B was dead.
B's already dead.
Oh, B's dead. A takes 100%?
So how does A own the property then? When there's only one owner?
Yeah.
and severalty.
Yes,
Severalty?
in severalty. Yep. So look,
Yay.
if now C dies, then A will get all of C's ownership and they'll own it in severalty as a tenant in severalty. And now they can leave it in a will to their heirs or devisees. Okay. Now let's paint another scenario. You got A, B, and C. They're all co-owners. Nobody dies. But C is sick and tired of A and B's crap, so they sell their interest. They find a new buyer, and they sell their interest to D. So C is no longer an owner. D took their place. They sold their interest to D. Well, A and B remain as joint tenants with each other because they were joint tenants in that original agreement. However, D does not have the unity of time or title. So therefore, they would be a tenant in common with A and B. D can leave their interest in a will to their heirs. A and B cannot. So therefore, now if B dies, A, there is no more joint tenancy, but there's also no tenancy in severalty. Instead, it reverts to tenancy in common, where A and D are now tenants in common with each other. However, A got a lot more ownership because they inherited B's when they died. D does not, because D was not a joint tenant. They were a tenant in common. See how that's possible to happen now too? And I got that whole write-up up here in the slide too that gives that explanation. It's not that difficult to understand when I'm explaining it to you, but you know, I come back and ask you an hour later, we'll see if you guys remember it. You know, you gotta study this stuff. Okay. All right. So let's highlight tenancy by the entirety is a special tenancy between spouses. Okay. The old books, it used to say it was ownership between husband and wife. However, Governor Christie changed the law in New Jersey, making gay marriage legal, so now gay people can experience the same miseries as the rest of us. All right. I joke. I'm not that cynical. Okay, so married couples, okay, spouses, married, it's between married couples. Spouses. All right, so the owners must be spouses or married when they receive the property. Interesting that they're using the word spouses instead of married or marriage. The owners have the right of survivorship, and there's no right to partition the property. Yes, if you need to sue your spouse to get them to want to sell the house and move, you guys got other issues you need to work out. So in New Jersey, a conveyance to a couple who are legally married to each other or registered domestic partners or civil or in a civil union creates a tenancy by the entirety unless the deed expressly states otherwise. In New Jersey, couples 62 years of age or older can register for a domestic partnership if they meet certain requirements. When a couple gets divorced, the tenancy by the entirety is broken and they become tenants in common. So that's why when people get divorced, then you could sue your former spouse to sell the property. Right? New Jersey does not recognize common law marriages. Most people think they know what a common law marriage is, but they're usually mistaken. Most people think that a common law marriage is when you've lived with somebody long enough period of time, you're automatically considered married. No, that's not it. Close, but not it. When you're a couple and you're known as a couple and you've lived with each other for a long enough period of time as defined by law for whatever state it is that common law marriage is legal in, if you wish to be considered married in the eyes of the law and legally, you can be married without having the formal ceremony take place. Okay. So under New Jersey law, a couple in a civil union are entitled to the same rights as a married couple as well. All right. So here I got the same notes here. You know, remember, Tenancy by the entirety. Ownership by married couples. The primary married residence, if married after May 28, 1980, or to all properties if married before, because you still got those dower and courtesy rights. Owners have the right of survivorship. Yes, when your spouse dies, you don't got to leave the house. It was the primary marital residence, at least, right? The surviving spouse has the right of survivorship. They get the ownership of that residence. Okay. New Jersey does not recognize common law marriages. I don't think they ever did. You want to know what states do or did? This has nothing to do with, you don't need to study this at all, but here, we could go to this link and see. So here are the states that do have common law marriage. Not all of them are states. Alabama, Colorado, District of Columbia, Georgia, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Montana, and New Hampshire. For inheritance purposes only, you could be considered a married couple. In Georgia, if it was created before 1/1/1997, okay, it is recognized. Oh wait, actually, this is the list of all of them. All right. So the ones that say yes, okay, they redid the way this site is showing them. I'm not going to read through all 50 states here then. Okay, so you could see these are the states that recognize common law marriage. Okay, they redid this. These are the states that do not recognize it. Even if you're got a common law marriage in another state, it is not considered recognized in all those other states. Let's see, states that previously allowed common law marriage. Let's see. Common law marriage states. Okay, I guess they just got it as this image here now. So currently, the states in green, well, that just is the recognition of common law marriage. It doesn't mean that they have it. States with common law marriage. Here we go. Here's the states that currently have common law marriage. Let me see. As of 2018, 8 states acknowledge common law marriages through final legislation. Those states are Colorado, D.C., Iowa, Kansas, Montana, New Hampshire, Texas, and Utah. Requirements to establish common law marriage vary by state. In D.C., marriage is legally recognized without a ceremony or marriage license if both parties are legally allowed to marry, wish to be married, and if the community knows the couple as husband and wife. Texas, there's 2 ways a couple can enter into a common law marriage. Yeah, by a shotgun if you knock her up, right? No, just kidding. So in Texas, there's 2 ways that a couple can enter into a common law marriage. One way is for a couple to agree to marry, live with each other within the state, and represent to others that they are married. Couples may also file a declaration of informal marriage with the county clerk. While some states permit people to get married before they turn 18 with parental consent, some common law marriages require that both parties be 18. Colorado and Kansas common law marriage, the statuses state this in the requirement. In some states, common law marriage is permitted only for specific purposes. For example, Iowa acknowledges common law marriages simply for the support of dependents. New Hampshire, it recognizes common law marriages just for probate purposes. Here are some states that previously had a common law marriage but got rid of it. Alabama got rid of it in 2017. Florida got rid of it in 1968. Georgia, 1997. Indiana got rid of it in 1958. Ohio in 1991. Pennsylvania got rid of it in 2005, and South Carolina just got rid of it in 2019. So these are the states that recognize other states' common law marriage. All right, so I just put that up because sometimes people get into conversation about common law marriage or are curious about it and how it works. So when people get when couples get divorces, ownership reverts back to a tenancy in common, which is the default form of ownership by two or more parties not married to each other, when they no longer have the right of survivorship. Who has the right of survivorship? Married couples and joint tenants, right? There's no right to partition the property while you're married, only after you're divorced. And a corporation cannot be a tenant by the entirety because corporations don't get married, people do. When corporations get together, they call it a merger. Corporations don't get married, people. Oh, I wrote that down. Okay, so the right of survivorship, once again, it's when one co-owner or spouse dies, the surviving co-owner or spouse will get the shares. They automatically inherit the ownership. It doesn't need to go through probate. And a partition, once again, is a court proceeding where one co-owner sues the other, forcing them to divide the property, if possible, or sell it. And therefore, that's an involuntary form of alienation. You didn't voluntarily sell it. You got taken to court and were forced to. All right, to review, tenancy and severalty is ownership by one person or entity. Tenancy by the entirety is ownership by married couples. A tenancy in common, the TIC, is the default form of ownership by more than one person or entity. And a joint tenant, you have to specify you wish to take ownership in this form. Corporations can never be a joint tenant because of their perpetual life existence. They must have 4 unities in common to have a joint tenancy, TTIP, unity of time, title, interest, and possession. And the only benefit to having the joint tenancy is the right of survivorship. And now that you know all of these rules and what each one of these forms of ownership mean, if you should be ever asked on exam, what form of ownership would you suggest that they take ownership in when they build up a scenario for you? Even if there's a perfect scenario and you know which one that they should select, your answer should be none of the above, because that's legal advice and we're not attorneys. However, if it asks, what form of ownership is this? That's a different story. Have at it. Use your knowledge now. Okay? Okay. Let's talk about businesses and business structures for a moment, shall we? We're not talking about ownership of real estate by businesses. All we're doing is talking about different types of business structures. If you have a business that's owned by one person, this is known as sole proprietorship. 2 or more owners, it's a partnership. Unless you formally create a corporation. A corporation is a legally formed business entity to get certain tax benefits and legal protections. But it requires a lot of paperwork, and parties need to serve in certain positions, and a lot more expense in order to have a corporation registered. I think it's like between $600 and $800 a year just to have it, that you got to pay annually to keep it registered as a corporation. But if you are a sole proprietor or a partner, you could register your entity as an LLC, a limited liability company. Doesn't stand for limited liability corporation, but a limited liability company. But you could get the same protections, the legal protections, as a corporation can when filing as an LLC. You also get taxed only once. You could do the pass-through, and the corporation only gets taxed once on its income instead of multiple times. However, if your LLC starts making a decent amount of cash, that decent amount of cash, I believe the breaking point is around, for it to be worth it, is $60,000 or more per year. If you start earning $60,000 or more per year, I think that's about it. speak with your tax professional. Okay, but I think it's around 60,000 a year or so, or I seen a tax professional's video there on YouTube where they said that around that point it would start to make sense where you could have an LLC that files their taxes as an S corp. You could select to have an LLC to get the legal protections that a corporation would, but the financial gain is not really there because you get taxed at like 15% or something like that. Here, actually, I got it written down. 15.3%. Okay. Now, it depends if you have other businesses or other jobs or income. But the S corp is an option that once you start making larger amounts of money, you could have that LLC that files taxes as an S corp to get certain financial advantages to it as well. So now you get the legal protections and the financial advantages, and you only get taxed once. Now, syndicate and joint ventures, they're not legally formed business entities where you got to file paperwork and pay fees to create a syndicate or a joint venture. A syndicate is a joining together of two or more people to carry out a business project. When the project is done, the syndicate's done. A joint venture is when you have two or more groups that come together to carry out a business project. When the business project is done, the joint venture is done. And we're going to learn about a real estate investment trust, a REIT. More importantly, we're going to learn about the tax benefits that they get. They get the same tax benefits as mutual fund investors. Who says that in your retirement plan you need to invest in commodities or stocks and bonds? Why not invest in real estate? So we're going to go over what's required in order to create a REIT. So let's first go over partnerships. The book, tremendously, whoever this guy was that was giving this advice and these easy way to remember stuff, he really screwed up the definition here. And I already pointed this out as one of the many examples to the book manufacturer, which is why they asked me to help them out on some of this stuff. In a general partnership, in talking about business partnerships, you could be a general partnership or a limited partnership. Every partnership has at least one general partner in it. So let me just explain what is a general partner. It is a business owner that works in the business and is familiar with the day-to-day activities of that business and can be held liable for any additional debts that that business takes on. In a general partnership, all of the partners are general partners. So cross out that sentence, which is totally wrong, that they wrote in a book that says, ironically, there's no general partner in a general partnership because all the partners participate in the day-to-day management of the business venture. Well, that's exactly what a general partner is. It's somebody who participates in the day-to-day business. So whoever this teacher was that gave that explanation, they're totally wrong. So cross it out. You should only have highlighted here, in a general partnership, all partners participate to some extent in the operation and management of the business, and they may be held personally liable for business losses and obligations, even beyond the amount of their initial investment. Whereas in a limited partnership, there must be at least one general partner involved that works in the day-to-day business activities of the business. And all the other partners can be limited. They're limited in their liability to the extent that the only thing that they could lose is their initial investment in the business. If that business goes out and takes business loans, the limited partners can't be liable to pay them back. They're like investors. They bought stock. They don't work in the day-to-day business. They don't play an active role in the day-to-day business. So they can't be held liable for the day-to-day business because they're just stock owners. They're limited in their liability to the extent that they could lose their initial investment in the business. That's it. Okay. So this is also wrong, and you should probably cross it out. That in the book where they say, remember, because the limited partnership must have at least one general partner to run the business, the general partnership is the only one that does not have a general partner. That's a wrong explanation. Okay. General partners, they're all the owners participate in the day-to-day activities of the business, and therefore they are all general partners. Whoever wrote this does not have an understanding of what a general partner is. So cross that out. Okay, everybody good? So here I got my definitions for limited partnership and general partner on this slide. It's just that a general partner, all the co-owners are general partners. A general partner is an owner that works in the day-to-day activities of the business and can be held liable for any additional debts that the business does take on. In a limited partnership, it has at least one general partner and the rest are limited. They do not take part in the day-to-day activities of the business, and therefore they're limited in their liability to the extent that they cannot be held liable to repay additional debts that the business takes on. They could only lose their initial investment in the business. Now, let me give you an example of a limited partnership, right? You guys ready? You want to start a business, right? So you go to the Bank of Mom for a loan. Mom gives you a loan to start your business. Mom doesn't know anything about your business. All she cares about is that you're successful in all your endeavors, right? So Mom does not work in the day-to-day activities of the business. Therefore, Mom is a limited partner in your business, and you are the general partner. You can be held liable for any additional loans that you take out for that business, but Mom cannot. Mom's worst case scenario, even she's a partner in the business now. She's limited, though, in her liability to the extent of her initial investment. That's all she can lose if your business fails. But if your business takes on additional loans and such, she can't be required to kick more money back in or to pay them back. Okay. It's like a stock investor. You buy stock in Google. They don't come to you for, hey, we need to raise more money. You got to pay us. We took out a loan. We got to pay that loan back. No, that's not how it works. Okay. You guys have any questions about general partnership and limited partnership? Or is everybody clear on it? So real estate ownership by corporations. A corporation's an artificial person, a fictitious entity, if you will, for taxation purposes and legal protections. Corporations cannot own real estate as joint tenants or tenants by the entirety. Because a corporation's perpetual life existence, they cannot be a joint tenant. Because corporations don't die, they get formally dissolved. They would always be the last man standing, so to speak. And a corporation can't be a tenant by the entirety because corporations don't get married, people do. When corporations get together, it's called a merger. So corporations can only own real estate as tenants in severalty or tenants in common if it's a partial ownership interest. Now, who makes all the decisions in a corporation to buy and sell real estate? Well, on page 366, we'll get a more full explanation of this. But right here, the board of directors, they make all the major decisions to buy or sell real estate. They look out for the best interest of their stock shareholders, or at least they should be. I know in recent years, we've been seeing a lot of this woke nonsense going on and forcing corporations that, hey, you need to support our social justice initiative here, and if you don't, we're going to talk bad about you and maybe even attack your businesses, and it's not going to look good. So they basically bribe and twist the arms of these businesses. Everything from the the rioting in the streets and the all that stuff. You had for a while this group called Black Lives Matter. They had a name, Black Lives Matter. Everybody agrees with that. However, it was just a name of their business that they put together, or I call it a business because they were in a business of shaking people down. And we see that now. Half those owners that created it are all in jail right now because they were taking money from corporations, millions of dollars. It was supposed to be a charitable thing, and put it towards um, uh, black causes for black people, but they weren't doing that. I guess they were, because the ones that created it were black. They said that, okay, we're the cause of the black people, so we're going to buy ourselves tons of mansions and expensive cars and everything like that. And they mishandled and misused these funds, and therefore they're a lot of them are behind bars right now. But the interesting thing is, it's they never pulled the charter for it as a nonprofit, despite all the mishandling of funds and the shakedowns of corporations and the threats to them, that we're going to get the word out there that you support racism and you're not for Black lives and all of that. Okay. That's the little thing with that. Now, we also had things where you had uh, uh, people pushing the transgender agenda, right? Okay, that's fine and all, but it really has no place in business. If you as an individual want to support it, then you support it. But if you got hundreds or millions of people investing their savings in your business, you should be making business decisions that would benefit your investors, not any kind of social initiative or anything like that that is a hot button topic that could go against some of your investors' beliefs, or could tank your investments. You guys all remember what happened with Bud Light, right? You had the one a president of that division of Bud Anheuser-Busch that ran Bud Light advertising. So you had a president of the advertising of Bud Light. She put in there that this whole series of commercials and ads with the one transgender male, that Dolan Mulhavey or something like that. I forget what his name was. Anyway, he's out there, Bud Light, and the drinkers, a lot of the drinkers of their products, their alcohol, these are like people that watch football games and go hunting, and they're not all into the whole trans stuff, and therefore they were not catering to their audience when they start putting in there as a woman in a bikini, a man in a bikini. It kind of went against it, and the people actually rebelled against it. And the stock shareholders, the stock tanked. People just stopped buying their product altogether, and it had a great hit in their stock valuations. I mean, that president eventually of that advertising division even got fired over it. The company still to this day has not recovered fully from that marketing campaign that they put into place. Bounced back a bit over time. This happened several years ago, and it is still struggling. I mean, you guys didn't hear about any of this in the news at all, or in the media? Yeah, you got to start changing the channels of news and start seeing from other news sources too. This is how this has happened. This is Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch. They even went back to the Bush family, who no longer owns it, and they went back to them and tried to get them involved or sell it to them, or they actually tried to reach out to buy it back so that they could rehash it and try to rebuild the legacy of it and get the sales up there again. But this is what happens when you have a board of directors that ignores their job, which is to protect and look after the interest of the shareholders, their stockholders. That's I'm surprised there's not more lawsuits against companies that do things like this against the best interest of their shareholders, because that is specifically their one job is to look after the best interest of their investors' money. So a corporation can convey real estate only upon a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. Okay? I don't tell these stories to get, to talk about, I'm just using common events that are recent in the society, just so that people can relate more to them. I'm not using these to push one agenda or the other. I'm just using it as an example, showing you what really actually happened to their stocks and such. Okay, so nobody should get hyper offended by any of this stuff. I hope you're not. This is just me giving examples of what's happening in the real world pertaining to this stuff. So I give you examples that you can relate to. All right, so if we go to page 366, well, actually here, first on page 124, sorry about that. First on page 124, let's highlight under corporations. Because a corporation is a legal entity, real estate ownership by a corporation is in severalty or as tenants in common if it's a partial ownership. And a corporation is managed and operated by its board of directors. And then we're going to give a little cross-reference, page 366, or see page 366. You should write there. The individuals participate or invest in a corporation by purchasing stock. Because stock is personal property, shareholders do not have a direct ownership interest in real estate. Each shareholder's liability for the corporation losses is usually limited by the amount of their investment in that corporation. Investors may opt for an alternative corporate ownership form called an S corporation. And like a corporation, this form of is a legal entity, but its investors avoid double taxation. Only the shares of the profits are passed to the shareholders, which are taxed, while the profits of the S corporation are not. However, S corporations are subject to strict requirements regulating their structure, membership, and operation. More so like a corporation, but it's like an in-between a corporation and an LLC, as far as paperwork and maintenance of that goes. All right, now we can go to page 366, and on page 366, we could see under the law of a corporation is considered to be a legal entity. 3 basic rules must be followed when corporations
Question.
are... Yeah.
Is that the right page?
Page 366, yeah, it should be.
Yeah, I have something different.
It doesn't seem to be.
The bottom of page 366, execution of corporate deeds.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. So there are 3 basic rules that must be followed when corporations are to convey real estate. One is, we'll highlight number 1 only. A corporation can convey real estate only upon a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. Now, if all or a substantial portion of a corporation's real estate is being sold, it's also usually required that a resolution authorizes the sale be secured by all the stockholders or be secured from the stockholders. How exactly are they going to do that? You know that a large portion may or may not respond to mailings that are sent to them if they even open their mail. Who the hell knows, right? So I'm not sure exactly what's required for a quorum there in order for them to have that vote and to go through with it. But that's like, say, General Motors, big corporation. They want to shut down one of their plants. Well, that's not a substantial amount of the corporation's real estate. That's just one of their big plants, perhaps. But it's not a substantial portion. So therefore, they just need to, the board of directors can pass a resolution to sell that plant and shut it down. However, if they want to shut down all of their plants, or half of their plants, a major substantial amount of their real estate is going to get shut down and sold. Well, that would require authorization from their shareholders. Otherwise, it's the board of directors that makes all those major decisions on behalf of the shareholders. Now, deeds to real estate can be signed only by an authorized officer. So the authority of the officer must be granted by a resolution being passed by the board of directors, giving them that permission to be the authorized signatory on behalf of the corporation. You can't just have some random person coming in saying, yes, I'm signing the paperwork to sell this property on behalf of General Motors. Right? They're going to laugh. They're going to be like, well, who the hell are you? What gives you the authority to sign on behalf? Well, you need to have a letter, that resolution that was signed by all the board members, that they voted a resolution where they voted to make you the authorized signatory on behalf of that corporation. So even if you have a little business that you started up on your own, you formed an LLC, limited liability company, and now even to create the bank account, you need to show that you're an authorized person to act on behalf of that limited liability company in order to open a bank account, let alone buy or sell real estate in the name of an LLC. All right. So if somebody comes to you and you see that this real estate is owned by a company, an LLC, or a corporation for that matter, you as a real estate agent, you got to question this a little bit. The guy comes to you, says, he wants to list the property for sale with you. You got to say, well, who the hell are you? Right? I mean, do you have the authorization? Are you the authorized officer to sign on behalf of the corporation or LLC? Prove it. I need a piece of paper. I need that resolution signed by your board of directors or by the general partners. Right? And if they don't have that, we can't take that listing. You're taking a listing from someone who you don't know has the authority. They need to prove that. If they say, well, I'm the owner of the LLC. Okay, well, then you should have some supporting documentation that shows that, right? You formed the LLC. You're the owner of the LLC. You should have some updated paperwork on that, shouldn't you? Well, if you don't, we can't take the listing. Sorry. I can get in trouble for that. Taking a listing from someone who I do not know is the actual owner and then putting it out there and advertising it. Right? Okay, so the corporate seal need not be affixed to the conveyance unless it's acknowledged, unless the acknowledgement mentions that there is a seal that should be used. Okay, but either way, the only thing that you guys highlighted here, because the only question you're probably going to get in this pertaining to exams is, who makes all the major decisions in behalf of a corporation? It's board of directors. Okay, back to page 124. I explained to you the syndicate and what a joint venture is already. I just got it here on this slide again. Joint venture is two or more people carrying out a business project. Like you and I, we're going to buy this house, we're going to fix it, and we're going to flip it. That's our business project, right? So when we're done with the flip, the syndicate's done. We don't have to file paperwork to legally form this business entity. It's called a syndicate. If you and I just get together to buy a house that we're going to fix up and flip it and share the profit, right? That's a syndicate. So we're doing that together. We're a syndicate. Joint ventures when two or more groups come together to carry out a business project. So similar to a syndicate, however, instead of individuals, they're groups. They come together to carry out a business project. That's it. So let's talk about a REIT. A REIT on page 124 is a form of organization that's useful for taking advantage of certain tax benefits. They get the same tax benefits as mutual fund investors. In order to have a REIT, there must be at least 100 investors, and 75% of that trust income must come from real estate as the investment vehicle. And it's a stable investment that pays out slow and steady. Right? So some examples of a REIT investment would be a large apartment complex with several hundred units, or a high-rise building, or business centers or shopping centers. REITs usually don't sell these properties; they hold on to them for the long term. They get the income from the rents. They slow, steady. People are going to pay their rents. Even if we get one or two tenants that don't, the majority of them will, and they'll get those tenants out that aren't, and they'll replace them with someone else. It's part of doing business, okay? But overall, the apartment complex is going to be profitable, right? So this is why not invest in REITs instead of stocks or commodities or whatever, like a mutual fund would. Okay, if you guys want to snap picture this, go ahead, because when we go to the what you need to highlight, we're going to have one page that shows that mutual fund investors get certain tax benefits. Then we're going to have to go to a different page, page 333, to see that what are those benefits, and then what is considered a REIT. Now, you don't need to study what is considered a REIT, but you do need to know for exams who do REIT investors get the same tax advantages as, and they are mutual fund investors. So I'm going to change the slide now. And here, okay, you're going to highlight on page 124, Real Estate Investment Trust REIT is a form of organization that is useful for taking advantage of certain tax benefits. Okay. And you could write there, they get the same tax benefits as mutual fund investors, and do a cross-reference, see page 333. And then this is a screenshot from page 333. Whenever you're done doing that, you go to page 333 and highlight Real Estate Investment Trust REITs. Real estate investors can take advantage of the same tax benefits of mutual fund investors. And then it goes into what do you need to have to be considered a REIT. You got to have at least 100 investors, and 75% of that trust income has to come from real estate as the investment vehicle. There's funds out there that you could invest in. They're REITs. They where you could just invest a small amount of money in real estate, in other people's real estate projects. The REIT will manage that money for investors who are investing in different real estate projects. You could also have ones like this where it's maybe for an apartment complex. You'll have a partial ownership in that, and they'll pay it out slow and steady into your retirement plan. Get the same tax benefits as mutual fund investors. I've had a REIT come into my office one time, and they were looking for certain kinds of buildings to see if I knew of any or had any listings for large shopping centers or apartment building complexes that had several hundred units. They were looking for a minimum price to purchase in the $10 million range. I said, I wish. And then they promptly gave me their business card and walked out the door. Okay, so what about a condo and a co-op? You guys ever hear of condos, cooperatives? You know the difference between them? Well, we're going to learn. So we're going to start off by reading on page 124. Okay, and I'll read through this too. So condos and cooperative ownership of housing has risen in the second half of the 20th century, together with townhouses and planned unit developments, PUDs. Condos and co-ops offer the emotional, financial, and tax advantages of homeownership, combined with various advantages of apartment living. As opposed to traditional single-family homes, condos and co-ops offer more efficient use of ever scarcer building land, lower costs for lot development, less outlay for construction per living unit, and some savings in the maintenance and heating bills. Contributing to the growth of condos and co-ops are changes in population patterns with the increasing number of single homeowners, right? One-parent families. See, as society changes, some of these things change. They do. So if you're going to be in real estate for the long term, you gotta keep an eye on patterns and changing of patterns in society of how things work, like single homeowners versus married couples, right? One parent families versus the married couples, and senior citizens. Sometimes they need to downsize, right? They don't need the big empty house when all the kids grew up and move out anymore. So to them, condominium or cooperative living will be a better proposition for them, where they don't got to worry about cutting the grass or the shoveling of the snow or things like that anymore. To such groups, community living offers security and sociability, ease of maintenance, and sometimes the opportunity in sharing expensive recreational facilities like swimming pools and exercise rooms, IMAX movie theaters, or even convention halls. The term condominium and cooperative refers to the forms of ownership, and simply looking at a shared housing complex gives no clue as to whether it's a condo, a co-op, or in some cases, a planned unit development, a PUD. The buildings themselves may be high-rises, townhouses, patio homes, garden apartments, or even single detached houses can be considered condominiums. The differences arise from the legal form of ownership, not the architectural style. Don't confuse the two. Condominium ownership is not limited to residential dwellings either. You have commercial condos. Anybody ever go to a business that had a commercial condo? Tax preparer, a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, masseuse, what have you. They may have a condo because it's cheaper, more affordable than to have a business condo rather than a standalone structure in real estate. So cooperative ownership is common in New York City. It's also found in certain areas of New Jersey. Cooperative ownership became popular in the 1920s as the urban population grew after World War I. Individual housing became more expensive, and the board of directors were choosy about who can buy in. Does that mean they were discriminating? Being choosy?
Yes.
But not in the negative, typical discriminatory way that you're thinking, because the word discrimination means being choosy. They're not talking about being choosy in the form of like racial discrimination way.
No, just in general.
Yeah. So the number of newly built cooperatives have decreased generally over the greatly over the last 50 years. So yeah, cooperatives, like you'll see, if you're ever rejected from membership in buying into a co-op, it feels like you've been discriminated. It feels like it's been wrong, or you've been wronged. You've been rejected. But often they do it for a reason, to protect the other co-owners in the building or the complex. Because if you get people who don't pay their bills on time, typically, that could put your other co-owners at risk if enough of them start doing that. So this is why cooperatives often have minimum credit score requirements to buy into a co-op. In a condominium, they don't. If you could afford to buy the condo, you're in, and then you pay your monthly maintenance charge. If you don't pay it, well, then you can get restricted from being able to use those amenities, or they could even start enforced payment of it through foreclosure. Only that one unit owner gets affected. However, because in condos, condo owners, they get their own tax bill, they get their own monthly maintenance charge bill, they got their own insurance bills, they got their own mortgage loans or what have you. With a co-op, who owns the real estate is what comes into question. It's a corporation that owns the real estate. And the person who buys into a co-op is buying stock in the corporation. And then the corporation gives you a proprietary lease to occupy the unit you're living in. Proprietary lease is a fancy name for a custom lease that gives you the right to live in the apartment that you're living in. Okay. So when you own a co-op, do you own real estate? No. You own stock in a corporation that owns the real estate. So how does the corporation pay its tax bills? Well, they add them into your monthly maintenance charge. So the monthly maintenance charge in co-ops is usually much higher than it is in condominiums. Because in condominiums, the individual property owners pay their own taxes. In a co-op, they spread that amongst all the stock owners, the apartment renters, so to speak, even though they're not renting. So they pass along those bills, and there may even be a underlying mortgage on the entire property still. They would include those fees in the monthly maintenance charge, the taxes, and for the upkeep of the grounds like the swimming pool and tennis courts, basketball courts, the parking lots, the walkways, the stairwells, and all those common areas. So let's highlight: title to the land and a building is held by a corporation. Each purchaser of an apartment in the building receives stock in the corporation and a proprietary lease. So can you get a mortgage loan to buy a co-op? No, because you're buying stock, right? You can't get a mortgage loan to buy stock. Because what is a mortgage? A mortgage is a promise to pay. And what does that promise say? Lend me your money. I'll pay you back according to the terms in the note. And if I fail to, you could foreclose on me, sell that property at auction, and use the proceeds to pay off the debt. One thing: in a co-op, you don't own real estate; you own stock. So you can only buy a co-op with a personal loan or cash. Okay, so the cooperative building's real estate taxes are assessed against the corporation as the owner. There's usually one underlying mortgage on the entire parcel of real estate, and taxes, mortgage, principal, interest, and operating expenses of the property are shared by the tenant shareholders in the form of a monthly maintenance charge. So even though co-op owners do not actually own real estate, they own stock, which is personal property. Highlight that. For all practical purposes, they control the property through their stock ownership and their voice in the management of the corporation. Co-op bylaws generally provide that each prospective owner must be approved by the board of directors. And you may want to write this in there: 620 minimum credit score is usually required. Because anything below 620 is considered prime. Anything below 620 is considered subprime. It's considered a poor credit score. So when you buy into a co-op, you often have to fill out an application. And sometimes with some cooperatives, they even interview you to see if you'll fit into their community. Oh, so when you get rejected, you really think that they discriminated against you then. Here, let me give you an example. Like you could have a co-op in Hoboken, similar to, I guess, some of the ones in New York and California, where they got an artsy-fartsy community, right, in this building. And basically, you need to be an artiste in order to buy into the co-op in this building. We only want people who are going to fit in here. So you need to be an artiste, an actor, a playwright, a dancer, a musician, a painter, a writer, a poet. So are you an artist? No? Well, then I'm sorry, you're rejected. Wouldn't that seem like you're being discriminated against? Well, you are, but it's legal. Because is being an artist or not a protected class? No, it's not. So they could turn you down for not being an artist. Don't feel right. Feels like you're being discriminated against, right? But it's legally allowed. And there are buildings like that. And there are plenty of lawsuits that end up getting thrown around that people start saying, I was discriminated against. Well, you were. But it's allowed because being an artist ain't a protected class. Okay. Continuing there, one disadvantage of cooperative ownership is the possibility that if enough owner occupants become financially unable to make their prompt payments of their monthly assessments, the corporation may be forced to allow the mortgage and tax payments to go unpaid. This was actually a problem in the 1930s. Through such defaults, the entire property could be ordered sold by the court order in a foreclosure suit. So even your neighbors that were paying their monthly maintenance charges, well, you know what? They got to go too. This is why co-ops are so strict on who they rent to. Because if they get some people, they start falling behind their bills or they don't pay their bills. If they have a habit of not paying their bills on time because of their low credit score, that's why they have a minimum 620 credit score requirement. Interview process. They want to really go over your financials before they give you a nod to buy into their cooperative. Because if enough of these co-owners don't pay their bills, it could affect your neighbors and the entire property can get foreclosed on like it did back in the 30s. Now, usually they have a lot more stricter requirements and, going over your finances and doing the interviews and stuff that they hope that they can avoid it. I guess back then they weren't as strict with it, and it resulted in the entire complexes getting foreclosed on, falling on financial hardship times. So let's also highlight an accumulation of substantial funds of reserves for future repairs and emergency payments. Okay, so what are reserves? An accumulation of substantial funds for future repairs and emergency payments. There's actually the definition of the word reserves. Should write that down. You will need to know that word. Or highlight. Now, shareholders have all the income tax advantages of the owner of a single-family home. The portion of their maintenance charges attributable to their property taxes and mortgage interest may be taken as income tax deductions. Interest is paid to finance the stock purchase is also tax deductible. Many co-ops do not permit rentals. You may want to highlight that. Because if the rental ratio of rentals is too high, prospective buyers may have difficulty obtaining adequate financing. However, New Jersey law provides that a co-op in buildings with 10 or more units may rent their units if they've been trying to sell for 4 or more months at a price no greater than their initial investment when they bought the property. So look at that. Co-ops, most co-ops actually have rules against renting. Do they all? No, I'm not saying that because I don't know what the rules are for all co-ops. It depends on each individual one, how they make up their own rules. But most of them, I'll tell you, do have rules against it. Why? Well, let me ask you a question. If you were to buy a condominium in Edison, what is like the average price condominium for like a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath in Edison? You know,
400,000, 500,000.
okay, well, let's be a little bit more conservative. Let's just say 300. Okay. If it was 300 for a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath condo in Edison, if it was 300,000. There are co-ops in Edison too. Let's say we get a co-op with all the same features, 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, and it's a co-op. How much would that go for, would you think? Do you know? Maybe about 75 grand. Now, your visitors couldn't tell the difference. It's 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. It's a nice apartment. They couldn't tell the type of ownership, whether it's a condo or a co-op, simply by looking at it. Okay. The differences lie in the form of ownership and the price. How many co-ops can I buy for that same 300,000? Instead of buying a condo, I could buy a bunch of co-ops and rent them out and become like an immediate landlord. Oh my gosh. Well, don't even try it because they don't allow it. They don't allow those rentals. So if you go buying a bunch of co-ops thinking you're going to become like this immediate real estate mogul and buying $75,000 units and renting them out, I got some sad news for you. Most of them don't allow it, the rental. That's why New Jersey created the law here that prevents it. They say that if there's 10 or more units there in a building, well, you're allowed to rent it if you're not able to sell it at a price no greater than what you bought it for. Most co-ops have a rule in it. Not all of them. I'm accounting for abnormalities there in the rules. I'm sure there's some out there that do allow it, but the majority of them that I've come across don't allow the rentals, and they basically say the ones that even do allow it, they usually require you to live in the unit for so many years before you can rent it, so that you don't have investors coming in there and buying up all the units and then renting them out. Now, cooperative living tends to develop somewhat differently from condominium occupancy. Long-term stability of tenants are more common, probably because of that whole interview process and such. The corporation's right to accept or reject any new owner is aimed at safeguarding the present ones, who would share the financial responsibility for a defaulting neighbor, but is often used to maintain a particular level of occupancy. All right. So, in cooperative ownership, title to the land is held by the corporation. So purchasers don't own real estate, they own stock, which is an intangible personal asset. They get a proprietary lease. It's a fancy name for a custom lease, which gives the tenant stock owner the right to occupy the unit they're living in. Income tax advantages are identical to those of single-family homeowners. The tenant has a voice to control the property management through their stock ownership. Maintenance fee is usually much higher than condos because it usually includes the mortgage, taxes, insurance, the CAM, that's common area maintenance charge, such as sewer, water, heat, trash, and snow removal. The value of the property tends to be a lot more stable too and doesn't fluctuate as radically as a condominium would. The shared expenses, usually there's one underlying mortgage on the entire property, has the tenant shareholders. Taxes are charged to the corporation as the owner and billed to the tenants as part of their monthly maintenance fees. So maintenance fees are usually much higher in co-ops than they are in condos. Even though the fee to buy the co-op is much cheaper, the monthly maintenance fee is usually higher because it includes that taxes and even heat and hot water are often included in, depending on the complex, but they're often included. Bylaws require each purchaser to be approved by the board of directors, which manages the corporation. There's usually a minimum FICO credit score of 620. And most do not permit renting. And, here's that breakdown unless there's 10 or more units and you've been trying to sell it for at least 4 months at a price no greater than what you initially bought it for, and you're unable to sell it. Long-term stability of tenants is common, and financing the purchase is going to be with a cash purchase or a personal loan, which they don't mention that particularly in the book there, but that is a rule. So real estate agents cannot prepare sales contracts for co-ops, another thing they don't mention here in the book, because that's stock. We're not licensed to sell stock. Even though we could market a co-op for sale, we don't prepare the contract to sell it. It needs to be prepared by an attorney. And quite frankly, most attorneys don't even really prepare it. What they do, most of the attorneys I found, they just steal the New York Housing Authority's co-op sales contract and they use it here in New Jersey, filling in the blanks. All right. So, page 126. The first condominiums were built in Puerto Rico in 1958, and the FHA allowed them to insure mortgages for condominiums by 1969. Many people were introduced to condominium ownership in Florida, which had introduced the concept from Puerto Rico. Popularity stems from the ability to obtain affordable housing, often in highly desirable areas that are typically beyond most people's economic reach. Buyers of condominiums, let's highlight, receive a deed conveying fee simple ownership of two things: their living unit from the paint on the interior walls inward. Remember, because behind those walls are the pipes that are connected to everybody's unit. You can't start messing with that. And the proportionate undivided interest in the common area elements. Now, chief among those common elements are the land and the exterior of the buildings, which you have the HOA maintains. Common property can also include the hallway, basements, elevators, driveways, stairwells, private roads, sidewalks, lawns, landscaping, and recreational facilities. In many respects, condominium ownership is regarded in the same light as the owner of a single detached house. Title can be held in severalty or by the entirety, as joint tenants or as tenants in common, and the unit receives an individual tax bill and may be mortgaged just like a house would be. The owners place a separate insurance policy on their living space. Income tax advantages are identical to those of single-family homes, and the owners are free to sell the property, lease it, give it away, or sell it or leave it to their heirs. Each unit's a financial entity, and if an adjoining unit is foreclosed, it does not affect your neighbors, unlike with co-ops. So owners are, however, bound by the bylaws of the homeowners association to which all will belong. If you are a condominium owner, you're a member of the homeowners association. Now, do you buy a condo to have a place to live, or so that you could be involved in your local politics of your condo complex? Probably to have a place to live, right? You don't want to get involved in the politics. It's like most people in town, right? You live in a city, you live in a town somewhere, right? Did you move there now? Have you run for politics because, that's what your thing is? You wanted to be able to now manage the city? No, you bought a house for a place to live. If you do get involved in politics, it's probably because you're fed up with how awful they're running it and managing it, right? But owners of a condominium you all become members of the homeowners association, and all of them have voting rights. Well, just like in a city, you live in a city, you got a mayor, you got a city council, you've got voting rights, right? But we elect these politicians, these elected officials, because we're not going to go down there and listen to every town hall meeting on every issue and vote for everything. So that's why we elect politicians. That's how government works here in the United States. In a condo complex, everybody that lives there will be on the board or will be a member of the homeowners association, and they could go down and they could vote on issues. However, they usually appoint people to manage the board in a homeowners association, kind of like we do with politicians. So think of a condo complex and that homeowners association and their board as like a mini government. Now, most people, they don't want to be involved in it. Just run the place right and don't screw it up. So you get some people that they'll be like, oh, I want to be on the board, and then they walk around just like most politicians, like their shit don't stink, and and there's nepotism that occurs. You guys familiar with nepotism? That's like when you hire all your family members in the government positions because you got pull, you got connections. So you hire your family members, and your family members get paid high fees and those great paying jobs, even though they may not be the best person for the job. You got that job because you knew somebody. Anybody ever go down to City Hall in their town and you see that, you got the one lady that works down at City Hall, but yet her kids are working behind her, or her kids got jobs down there at City Hall as well?
Oh yeah, we had a really bad case in South Plainfield with he's actually the big guy in the building department.
Uh-huh.
He has a nephew that does the inspections for South Plainfield. And he fails everyone. Like I think all the contractors know of this man.
Yeah.
And when we went and complained, somehow, some way we found out that he is untouchable because he is the nephew of the big guy in the
Okay.
building department. So if you're on his bad side, just forget it. Your project's not gonna, South Plainfield.
Well, here's a question for this. Did that guy get does he even meet the requirements it's required for the inspector job? That's the problem where nepotism comes into play, though. Like you get these people down at City Hall. Look, any public job in government needs to be posted publicly so that you could get the best candidates for a job that the taxpayers will be paying their salary, right? You want to get the best candidates for the job, and with nepotism, that's not what happens because you're giving it to family members. Like I live in Linden, okay? My mayor, Matthew knows the deal here. He's got our mayor. He actually got two sons that just graduated high school recently, and he got them both jobs down at the Linden Roselle Sewage Authority. These people have zero experience in anything. They just graduated from high school, but yet they got these jobs without it going into public post boards for other people to get them, starting at $55,000 a year straight out of high school, with the government benefits and the higher pay, straight out of high school. The whole family's got jobs like this. They hired the new guy as the public communications person who does all the filming and photography and everything. We had a guy down there that's been doing this for the last 25 years or whatever. So he recently got his walking papers to go because the mayor hired his cousin to do that job now. Now you figure, oh, okay, so what kind of savings are we seeing? This guy's getting paid 3 times the amount the other guy was. Nepotism a little bit. It's not like the guy's even doing a better job at it. All right, so we get some people that get involved in condominiums. Listen, I sold a lot of condominiums in my time. When I started in real estate, I was like, okay, I'm going to be selling those mansions, those rich people. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make a killing. Just like most of you are probably thinking now too. But you know what? Those people are those rich people that own those mansions, those expensive houses. They ask a lot of questions. They ask for your experience. They ask an annoying amount of questions, and they're major pains in the ass. You're probably not going to get those listings, okay? At least at the beginning, not for a while. I ended up finding that, examining my business at the end of the year to see what worked best for me. And, I've dealt with a lot of people buying 2-family houses, single families, fixers and flippers. That's what I was doing, a lot of those. But by far, the majority of my sales where I was making money was selling condos. So I got really good at it. And, they didn't get paid as much for each of them, but I was selling a lot of them, so I was making good money doing it. So I even started branding myself and marketing myself as the condo king. Yeah, as cheesy as that sounds, you got to find your niche there when you're selling stuff. And but I started to notice, and I got familiar with selling condominiums. There's certain things you need to look out for. So New Jersey does permit. New Jersey law permits associations to enforce their rules by fining residents who comply with their rules. So as long as the rules are not unreasonable, New Jersey allows these homeowners association to make rules that their residents have to comply with. And if they fail to comply with them, they can fine residents for that. All right. Now, I have found that when all my sales here, that often times when people sell their condos, it's either because their family is growing and they need to upgrade, get a bigger place. Or more often than not, it's because they can't stand the homeowners association. They act like a bunch of Nazis running around with their clipboards, creating all kinds of rules and finding residents all up in their business, finding residents for failure to comply with their rules. I'll even show you a little video on that. Now, while condominium boards can stall or exercise the first right of refusal, if it does, they rarely have the right to file to evict an owner. Yeah, well, they can. And monthly maintenance fees are levied for the maintenance, insurance, and management of the common area elements. We call that CAM charges. They should have that written there, CAM. We call that common area maintenance charge. It's CAM charge, just like with commercial real estate, common area maintenance charge, CAM, we call that. So if unpaid, these common charges become a lien against the individual unit and may even be enforced by foreclosure. Bylaws also set up covenants, conditions, and restrictions. They're known as CC&Rs, which, for example, could prohibit the display of a for sale sign or painting your front door bright red. Uniformity maintains property values. So if something is non-conforming to the neighborhood, it may not maintain the value as well. This is why condominiums, they don't want you painting your front door bright red or sticking out, doing some kind of a unique decoration from the exterior. They want everything looking uniform. Otherwise, it starts looking like junk. Uniformity maintains property values a lot better. So if you notice, most condo complexes, all the units either look the same or they have like an alternating pattern to bust up the look a little bit. But it's a uniform alternating pattern of the look because it maintains the values better. Right? Another way we could also look at this when it comes to just standalone houses is you ever see that most neighborhoods, all the houses are of one architectural style? They're all Cape Cods, or they're all split levels, or they're all colonials. The neighborhoods where they have all different houses or all different types and styles, they usually don't maintain their value as well. Especially when you have neighborhoods where you have a residential property next to a commercial property, next to a different type of residential property altogether, next to an apartment building. Those neighborhoods do not maintain values well because they're non-conforming. So it never pays to have a mansion in the middle of a middle-class neighborhood either. You'll never get your money back. Doesn't maintain, right? So for sale signs, you guys need to worry about that. In condo complexes, you're probably not going to be able to do an open house. If you do, it's going to be by appointment only, because they usually don't like you to put a for sale sign up front. You can't even put one inside the window. Most of them have rules against it. So forget about putting up those directional arrows with balloons outside directing to the unit within the complex to where we have the open house. You're going to go around that whole complex laying them out. By the time you make that full circle and come back, you got the maintenance workers that are ripping them out of the ground and throwing them in the back of their truck to throw them in a dumpster. I learned that the hard way. Because it's against our rules. So a condominium is governed by its board of directors, consisting of often elected volunteers who usually live in the building. As fiduciaries, they have responsibility of loyalty and care and duty to protect the community. They should have enough time to be involved and possess knowledge of accounting and good business practices to preserve and protect the assets. The day-to-day operations of a condominium are generally handled by a condominium manager. All right. So some of those condo complexes that I found that people move out of because the way that they're managing it, often I find this is what usually occurs. You have a lady on the board of the condos, and she's like, my husband owns a landscaping business. We should have him as the landscaper for the condo complex. And then you got another guy on the board. He's like, yeah, well, my wife's a lawyer. She should be the lawyer on retainer for the condo complex. You see, so instead of putting out bids for people to get these job positions or to be on retainer, to get the best person for the job at the lowest price possible, instead you got people just appointing them just because who they know. Oh, my husband's a landscaper. Oh, my wife's an attorney. And instead of trying to get the best person at the cheapest price, they could be getting not such a good person at a more expensive price. And they're not, but they act like politicians. Politicians do this crap all the time in your town, right? They don't get necessarily the best person to do the job, and they don't care how much it costs because it's your money. If they need more of it, they'll just raise your taxes. So condo complexes, these people that are on the board, if they act like this, they don't care. It ain't their money. They'll just raise your monthly maintenance charge. Do you know how to know if they're going to raise your monthly maintenance charge in a condo or not? Often when we have buyers that want to purchase in a condo complex, we need to get a list of their bylaws. So we need those CC&Rs that are printed out from the homeowners association, so we know what the rules are to follow. But you also ask the condo complex for their financials. So they'll have their accountant prepared 2 to 3 years of the last 2 to 3 years of the financials for the complex. Through this, you can look up and see how much it costs to manage that complex monthly. You should have 2 to 3 months of reserves in your finances to be able to run the association if not another penny were to come in today. If you don't, I guarantee you your monthly maintenance charge is going up soon. That's a good way, that's a good indicator on how to figure that out. I never knew what why they asked for financials. I actually asked an attorney, I said, what specifically are you looking for when you're asking for the financials? What are you looking for specifically? And they were like, well, you want to see what their monthly maintenance charges are and if they have enough to cover the next 2 to 3 months already in their reserve account. Because if they don't, they're being mismanaged and they're going to be raising the monthly maintenance charge here. And then we also want to look at the bylaws, because if they got the rule book that's like this, okay, that's not bad. But if the rule book is like this, you better really consider wanting to move in there. So how do we create a condominium? How do we establish a condominium from scratch? You got some raw land. You want to build a condo. Okay, well, in New Jersey, the creation of condominiums is regulated by the Horizontal Properties Act and the Condominium Act. And the New Jersey Condominium Act applies to condominium associations created after January 7th, 1970. First, the owners of the property would execute and record in the master deed in the file record and file it in the public records of the county where the property is located. Many items need to be contained in or attached to that master deed, including a legal description of the land, graphic descriptions of the buildings, and other improvements, which identify the individual units by letter or name or number or a combination of them, and specifies a percentage of the common elements, if any, are included in the ownership of each unit. You could have one condominium, you could have 2 units, 2 condo units, they look exactly the same. They're even in the same building, but one is going for tremendously more money than the other. You know why? It could be that one has a deeded parking space that they own and has a separate deeded storage unit in a basement in that building or another building in the complex. They got like a 10 by 10 room that's a storage room or a cage in a basement. And they have a deeded parking space that is assigned to them that they own. That could be the cause of the increase in value. Okay. Including legal description of the land, graphic descriptions of the bill. Okay, let me see. included in the ownership. A description of the common elements, a provision for association of unit owners, and a starting out list of the bylaws for that association is required in order to create a condominium complex. All right, so what do we do if we buy a multifamily house or a multi-unit building, and we're going to convert it, an apartment building, multifamily house, and we're going to convert it to condo? What's required for that? Well, we call that a condo conversion. Damn it, I thought it was the next slide. Thought I was being slick. Nope, not the next slide. I guess we'll have that coming up in the next couple slides. First, with condo ownership, I'll get to it. Sorry about that. We'll get to that condo conversion thing in a bit. So what do you own when you own a condo? You get fee simple ownership of two things: their living unit from the paint on the interior walls inward, and a proportionate undivided interest of those common area elements. You become a member of the HOA, the homeowners association. All unit owners will become members of that HOA. The bylaws, or CC&Rs, those covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the rules and regulations of the homeowners association, which the state of New Jersey allows your HOA there to create these rules, and as long as they are not ridiculous, fine residents who fail to comply with them. Like, they don't, often you have some common ones like this. They don't allow for sale signs. They don't allow you to paint your front door a wacky color. They don't allow oversized or commercial vehicles in the parking lot, or decorations in a flower pot. That's often what they refer to when you put a flag in a flower pot. You call it a decoration. Because then you're going to have everybody, you're going to get the proud veteran. He puts it up there, his American flag. And then you're going to get someone else that they're going to start putting all kinds of, gay pride and foreign flags and everything like this over there. Now it starts to look ridiculous because everybody's got a million different flags hanging from their unit. It starts to look like trash. So the association just say no decorations in the flower pots, and you can't have any flags out there, They don't allow vehicles with car wraps in the parking lot, things of this nature. Now, on the next slide, we're going to have a video, but these goof videos are often coming with a sliver of fact to them about invasive condo rules that are put in place. Okay, the HOA, the Homeowners Association, everybody's going to become a member of that, but you're going to be charged a monthly maintenance fee for the common area maintenance. If left unpaid, they could be enforced by foreclosure. Now, condo complexes with at least 25 units, usually professional management is hired, but not always. And if it's not, are they managing it properly? You guys ever see this? I think this is another one of the Geico commercials, or one of them, the insurance commercials. This is one about those invasive condominium rules, which, by the way, look at the building behind them. It's a single-family detached house, or sometimes you could have them where there's 2 units, right? Remember, you can't tell if it's a condo simply looking at the architectural style. Take a look at this.
We love our new home. Neighborhood's great.
Amazing school district. The HOA has been very involved.
These shrubs aren't board approved.
You need to break down your cardboard.
Thank you.
Violation. Violation.
I see you've met SIP. Yep.
At least Geico makes bundling our home and car insurance easy.
It does help us save a bunch of money.
2 inches over regulation.
Thanks, Cynthia.
For bundling made easy, go to Geico.
Now, it seems kind of ridiculous, but, there is some truth in this. They don't just make up these commercials because they're so creative. There is some truth in these homeowners associations and the ridiculous rules and enforcement that they do. Usually the people that get on these boards or I'm not going to say usually, but a lot of times the people that actually want to be on these boards to run and manage the condo association got nothing better to do with their lives. They become like your politician. They got nothing better to do with their lives but stick their nose in your business. You could see this overbearing lady here, and I'm assuming that that's her husband there walking around with the clipboard, writing down every violation. You know, that's what these people, they actually do this. You know, I had a listing for a condo that was converted. It was converted from an apartment building into condominiums, so individual unit owners. Now, this building was not created to be condos; it was created to be apartments. So they have a laundry room in the basement somewhere, you know, and they don't want you to have washer and dryer units in your individual condo unit, because the plumbing was not created to handle that in every apartment in this building. This building was originally an apartment building. So often those buildings that were converted from apartments to condos, they have those plumbing issues, and they usually do not allow you to have a washer and dryer in your unit. So I had this great landlord. You know, he has a bunch of different properties. Some of them are condos, some of them are just standalone houses. And he always comes to me when he has a vacancy and he wants to rent it out. He's a great landlord. He actually even puts advertisements out there and then puts my number there, and he forwards the calls to me for anybody that may be of interest, you know. And I'm telling you, you don't got to do that. It's my job, you know. But, he has a problem. There's something messed up in the kitchen or something. The guy will remodel the kitchen. I mean, he's a good landlord, you know. And I know he had a couple of issues with tenants before. I know he had also issues with the condo association, because so I basically had this condo unit of his, and I put the ads out there, and then I put the ads out in other places too, you know, places like the Craigslist and things of that nature as well. I syndicate them out all over the place. But I put up their pictures of the inside of the condo, which also included a over-under washer and dryer unit. Now, I didn't know, but this condo association, he's not allowed to have that over-under washer unit there. You're not allowed to have one in your unit. So he's like, did you advertise the property in this place? You got to take down those pictures. He's like, look, I got the association. They're reaching out to me. Look, they sent me these printouts and they circled the washer and dryer unit. And they said that they're going to come by to inspect it. And I better not have it there. Otherwise, they're going to fine me for having it. And I got to pull it out of the building really quick. And so he had to pull out the washer and dryer and everything, have them come in and inspect it. It was a whole ordeal, because they're like stalking the residents. They're looking for any ads that they put for condos in that complex, and they did the printout of it even, you know. It's like, come on, give it a rest. That's how bad they want to look at everybody, make sure they're complying with the association's rules. So here's a couple more examples too on realtor.com. Here's some more ridiculous ones. An HOA forces homeowners to leave the garage door open. Could you imagine? Your condo association requires you to keep your garage door open at least halfway Monday through Friday. Otherwise, you'll be fined. Now, isn't that a security issue? Isn't that an invite for like rodents to come into your house too, and bees nests and all kinds of stuff, thieves to walk in? I mean, what do you keep in your garage? You know, you keep your stuff in there. You want it secured. You don't want it open all day long. But now when you're at work, you got to leave it open because of a ridiculous HOA rule. Now, why did they implement that rule? I could tell you without going there and reading the article. It's because some people were finishing their garages and then renting them out, allowing people to live in them. All right. So the HOA said, well, everybody got to keep their garage door open now because we want to monitor that, you know. I don't know if I would deal with that. Or how about this other one? The HOA forced me to buy a $500 mailbox. So this guy just bought himself a nice mailbox, and he set it up in a nice stanchion and everything. Nice custom mailbox, matches his house. It didn't cost him that much money to do. But now the HOA says, okay, well, we got these mailboxes. We want everybody to use the same mailbox, and it's going to cost you $500 each. On principle, he said no. Because what if I replace my roof? And what now? The individual, if the HOA says that they're going to be, they want everybody to replace the roof, and it's going to cost so much money, I'm going to have to replace my roof because they didn't like the cedar shingles that I used. Look, first of all, most condos are responsible for the exterior of the buildings. Okay, but if some of them with standalone houses and stuff, they could allow you to be responsible for something. So not all of them work exactly the same. But this guy, he was actually he actually worked for NASA, I think it was. So I forget the exact story on it. Yeah. Man battles his HOA for 7 years over a $500 mailbox and wins. Okay, but it took a lot of time and money and legal fees. And you see, the guy actually was an astrophysicist working for NASA. So he put the money in there because he said, this is ridiculous. He just bought himself a new mailbox, but they wanted this ugly cast aluminum mailbox costing $500. Pictured below, this mailbox to be used. Instead of having a standard mailbox, which I think this one actually even looks nicer. He's required to buy this for $500. I don't see $500 there, but okay. They were going to charge him $500 for that. So he fought it. Instead, he bought one for $35 and installed that previous to it. He had a charming and functional cedar mailbox just months earlier. So he wasn't buying that line or that fancy mailbox for $500. He fought it out in court. It cost him $33,000 in legal fees, not to pay $500 for a mailbox. But he eventually won, and he wasn't even going for money. He sued them over $1 just on the principle of it. So $33,000, 7 years later, he won the case and is $1. But now nobody has to pay that $500 mailbox. So do your due diligence before you buy in a HOA, condo association too. All right, so creation of condos, we already seen, is created by the Horizontal Properties Act and the Condominium Act. Certain tenants may not be evicted during condominium conversions. We're going to be going over that slide, which I already mentioned. Owners of a condo have the income tax advantages identical to those of single-family homeowners. The condos can be any architectural style. It could be a single-family detached dwelling, multi-unit attached housing, high-rises, garden apartments, townhouses, etc. Reserves, I told you, is the amount of money saved up for emergencies and repairs. So built into those CAM charges is a little extra fee that will go to build up the reserve account. It's extra money built into the monthly maintenance charge for emergencies and repairs. So there should be at least 2 to 3 months operating expenses in the entire complex's reserve account to manage that complex for 2 to 3 months without another penny coming in. Otherwise, they'll be raising your monthly maintenance charge soon. I put together this side by side for comparison for condos versus co-ops. Do you own real estate? With a condo, yes. With a co-op, no. You get stock and a proprietary lease. Do you get a mortgage bill with a condo? Mortgage loan? Yes. But cash or personal loan for co-op. Tax bills you get with condos, but not with co-ops. Because you don't own the real estate. It's built into your monthly maintenance CAMs charge instead, as you can see on the next point. Is an HOA application required for approval? Not for condos, but yes for co-ops. There's a minimum credit score requirements, not for condos, but yes for co-ops. HOA manages condos, board of directors manages the cooperative. Insurance you got to get homeowners insurance for a condo, for a co-op, renter's insurance. Can it be rented? Condos can, co-ops cannot, except if you got 10 or more units and you've been trying to sell it for 4 months or more at a price no greater than your initial investment. The income tax advantages are identical for both. And can owners be affected if your neighbors don't pay their CAM charge? Well, not with a condo, but co-op, yeah. So let's talk about that conversion now that I brought up before. If you buy a multifamily house or an apartment building, you can convert it into condominiums and get a deed for each unit. However, to create a conversion, to convert that to a condo, what is required? Well, it's regulated by the state's Horizontal Properties Act, and it requires approval 3 years and 2 months before the conversion may start, if it's not vacant. So if it's not vacant and you have unit owners there, can you evict them so you could convert it to condos? No. Actually, if you have people that are there, if they meet all of these following criteria, they could remain as tenants for the next 40 years. There's nothing you could do about it. People who are age 62 and older, or certain disabled persons, if they lived there at least 2 years before the conversion began, and their income is no more than 3 times their county's per capita income, or in any case, no more than $50,000 per year. If they meet all 3 of those requirements, they can remain there for the next 40 years as tenants. And you can't kick them out just so that you could sell the unit as a condo. These are those people that they, Law and Order. You guys see those shows on TV, Law and Order, Special Victim Units, and all those programs. They made up those episodes where you had that person that owned that condo or a co-op unit that they were paying $600 a month rent. They're like, in New York City, how's that even possible? Especially in a building in this area. They're like, well, that's probably why they were killed. So they make a story about it for like those shows on TV, because you could see that possibly happening. Somebody, they can't sell the unit, so now you got to keep them as tenants for the next 40 years, and then you can't kick them out until they're 102 years old. Now you're just mean. Right? Because if they're 62 years of age or older, and they meet all these requirements, 40 years, 102. Okay. So we can highlight that now here in the book, page 127. You don't have to waste all that highlight ink. You can just put a highlight box around the whole thing. So it just shows what's required to do a condo conversion up here. And down here is who you can evict from a condo conversion. Now, condominium owners receive a deed, and therefore they own real estate. Co-op owners, they receive stock in a corporation and a proprietary lease that allows them to occupy the unit that they're living in. So technically, they don't own real estate. Let me know when you all got this so I could switch a slide. You're all good? Still highlighting. Let me also throw out that after lunch attendance poll, especially since so many of you shut off your cameras. Make sure everybody's here. Okay. So everybody got these notes yet? Okay. What is a townhouse? A townhouse is an architectural style. It's multi-level attached housing, side by side. Each unit is multi-level. That's a townhouse. Sometimes they have a garage beneath them, sometimes they don't. Now, a lot of people mix up townhouses with condominiums. Okay, when they say, I want to buy a condo, they're thinking about townhouses. Or we even get people that call up that say, I want to buy a condo. I don't want any of those apartments. Or no, they say, I want to buy a townhouse. I don't want any of those condos, where you got neighbors above you and below you and on the side of you, and I don't want to worry about cutting the grass or shoveling the snow. All right, you just lost me there. So I know what they're saying. They don't want the apartment building style condominium unit where you could have a neighbor above you, below you, and on the side of you. They want an architectural style of a townhouse that is also a condominium ownership. So the maintenance on the exterior is done by the homeowners association. You see, you could have townhouses. Townhouse is just an architectural style. You could have a townhouse that's fee simple ownership or condominium ownership. So they were describing to me when they make that statement that they're looking for a townhouse that is a condo. But when they call up saying, I want a townhouse, but I don't want none of those condos, I know what they're talking about. So I want you to know what they're talking about. And because of this, a lot of people don't know and they get lost in it. Townhouse is an architectural style. Condominium is a form of ownership. It's fee simple ownership from everything on your paint on your interior walls inward and a proportionate share of the undivided elements, common area elements. The rest is maintained by the HOA. So you guys have this highlighted, what a townhouse is, and that townhouses can be condominiums, or they could be owned in fee simple. And simply looking at the architectural style gives you no clue as to which one it is. Although sometimes it can. And I'll show you what I mean. Everybody got this highlight? So here's just another slide I made up because so many people get this mixed up. Condo is a form of ownership. It has an HOA in charge of maintaining the common area elements, usually the exterior of the building as well. And they have rules the owners must follow, those CC&Rs set up in the bylaws. A townhouse is an architectural style. It's not a form of ownership. It's multi-level attached housing that shares a common party wall. Townhouses could be fee simple ownership or they can be condos. Often they are condos. The owner doesn't have to cut the grass, remove the snow, maintain the siding, the roof, etc. Or they could be fee simple ownership without a HOA. The owner could be responsible for maintaining their part of the common area and the exterior as well. Here's a picture of some condos in my town, or some townhouses in my town. They are not condominium ownership. They're fee simple ownership. So remember I told you that you can't usually tell simply by looking at an architectural style what form of ownership it is? This one you can. Look, the stairwell, look at this, what do you call them? The railings don't even match. Here you got brown railings, here you got white railings, and they got different style of railings. Here you got a different style of railings from this one to this one, and they're a different color altogether. Different even types of roof material. Here you got two that aren't even the same color, so you could even have alternating patterns. That's fine. But over here, now the pattern even changes between the two units. And you got different types of stairwells. One of these, I think, is a brick. One of them is wood. This is wood. This is wood. So sometimes you get a clue. Here's another picture of the whole complex. Okay. Now, these townhouses are about 100 years old. I know they're over 100 years old. And look at the maintenance. Some of them have bushes, they're neatly trimmed, and the other ones, they do not. Look at this one. It's got overgrown brush. The grass is growing over. While these ones got it nice and trim. This one, look at this. Even the lattice is falling off the side here of the building. You got different color siding. This is not condominium ownership of a townhouse. These are fee simple ownership. So sometimes you could get a clue. If this was a condominium ownership, they would not let it have different maintenance patterns, different colors, different styles of stairways and walkways and railings and such. It would all be uniform. Okay. You guys ever hear of a timeshare? Timeshare is a form of ownership. You got 52 weeks in a year, right? So you got 51 co-owners. Depends on how long the timeshare ownership is for. It's usually around a week, but it could be a week or 2 weeks, or some cases even a month. So depending on the length of the timeshare would indicate how many co-owners there are. So timesharing is a form of shared ownership. I want you to write that there in your book. And then on page 128, highlight, a timeshare buyer has the right to cancel a timeshare contract up to 7 days after signing the contract for new construction only. New construction only. So timeshares, you can usually find them. They're vacation destination resorts. Anybody ever get sold on a timeshare pitch? Somebody tried to get you to go to a timeshare?
I did in Mexico, and I actually did sign up for the timeshare. I think it's okay.
Oh, do you still own it?
No, not anymore. It's expensive.
How'd you get rid of it?
Well, what I did was I didn't get rid of it fully. Somebody else has taken control of the payments.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Okay. Oh, timeshare ownership, they usually get you at these vacation destination resort places, right? And they usually sell you on, well, this way you could go on vacation regularly and you could afford it, I mean, otherwise you're having to book hotels and who knows how much that they're going to cost. And, you may not be so willing to go on vacation anymore because it costs so much money and blah, blah, blah. This way you could actually own your own unit that you're going to have, and you could go on vacation every year. That's the spiel that they give you. But really, there are a lot of negatives to timeshare, probably more negatives. It's probably one of the worst purchases you could ever make in your life. Okay.
I say something, but we don't even know that, like, when they're like advertising the timeshare to you on the resort, like they get you when you're a little bit tipsy. That's the problem. That's first mistake. And then like they present it in a way like it's great, it's wonderful, it's exceptional. Like that's how they present it. And then you're stuck with it, and the payment it's not worth it.
I know this. I actually went to a timeshare. They got me coming off of an escalator in Las Vegas, and I had these two young beautiful girls coming up to me and all like, hey, you want to come, listen to this presentation, they do this on purpose, they to try to get people and recruit them, and they pay those people to try to get you to the show on time, I guess, so to speak. And then once you get there, I refer to it as a 3-ring circus because there's 3 rounds of salespeople you got to get through, even if you're trying to get out of it. They usually try to get you. They usually get you in there by offering you something for free, right? A free meal, free show tickets, or something, right? And then they kind of guilt trip you into trying to buy. Now, I went in there because I know that timeshare salespeople, they're highly trained, highly skilled, and I want to see what they use, what methods that they used. So I went into this timeshare to check it out. I know what timeshares are about and how they work. It's a high pressure sales environment. Look, they used a bunch of pretty girls to come up to me, and I'm sure they got a bunch of handsome young guys that they got going up to the girls too, doing the same thing. And then they once you get there, the first round of salespeople that you deal with, they they're usually looking like supermodels, you know. At least that's how they were the place that I went to. I could see all the salespeople, the girls and the guys, they were all like beautiful people, you know, but they're all highly trained salespeople and licensed real estate agents because you need to be licensed to be involved in this. And that's all part of the whole thing, you know, because it's hard to say no to someone you're attractive to, right? So that's part of the whole three-ring circus there. But if you manage to get past them to get your free stuff and get the hell out of there after the presentation, then you're going to go to someone else, a more experienced person, maybe not as pretty, but they have a little more experience in sales. They're going to try to turn it on too for you for a while to sell it to you. And then if you get past them, well, they'll take you off into a separate side room where you could wait for the supervisor, who will then give you your free stuff and you could be on your way. And they'll have you sitting in there and sitting in there. This is like the cool off period. And once you feel like, all right, I had enough of this. Where the hell is this guy? Boom, he's going to pop up. For me, the guy popped up when I was, you know, I didn't look in this room. I should have looked. They probably had a camera sitting in that room watching me, like they did in the main presentation room, where they show their video about their resorts and their company and how it works and all their properties. And usually they have video cameras in the ceiling looking at you. It used to be that they had the timeshare sales rep sitting right next to you. They found that that's a little bit too high pressure, so you're more relaxed if instead they have video cameras in the ceiling looking at you and their salespeople are in the next room watching you. And they're like, okay, who's my victim? All right. And they watch you watching the timeshare sales video pitch and from the other room. And when you're like, oh yeah, honey, look at that, you know, now they could see your reaction and they know what buttons to press with you when it comes to trying to sell you that timeshare, you know, by your reactions to watching the video. They're taking notes. It's all a big psychological game. You know, these people get training, but it's all psychological here. So it is a high pressure environment for sure. So at the end of the day, I'm in this last guy's office and he's like, so why'd you come in here? Just for the free stuff? I was like, of course. And he's like, oh, I know how it goes, you know. But he's like, that's how we get you to come in, you know. But it is a good property. You had to have some interest in it, right? He's like, so what was it? Was it the purchase price? Was that it? Well, you know what? What if I told you, because I'm the supervisor here, I could authorize things that they couldn't out there. What if I did this for you? What if I was able to bring that sales price down a bit and I do this for you and if I did this for you, would that make it more, would you be interested now in purchasing? And I was like, no. And he's like, you're a tough negotiator. He's like, okay, what if I do this? I cross this out, I'm going to give it to you for this price. How about that? That's the best I could do. I can't go any lower than that. You know, I got to feed my kids still, you know. And so will that do it for you? This is something they do, actually, guys, and you should get in the habit of doing this too. Putting a pen in somebody's face when you want them to sign a contract, because they're not going to go reaching for it or asking for it on their own. For expensive purchases like this, you gotta help them along and give them the contract and the pen to sign it. That's a good tip that you guys should get out of that timeshare sales thing. That's probably the only one that you should get out of there, you know. So the guy, he negotiates with me and he brings it down to this price and he's like, that's the lowest I could do. And I'm like, nah, I can't do it. And then he's like, it's the interest rate, isn't it? Yeah, I know how you feel. It's like the interest rate is a little bit high. Maybe I could work with that a little bit. What if I could get the interest rate where you still get this price and I lower the interest rate down to this? I may be able to do that for you. Would that do it for you today? And you still get all your free stuff. I was like, that's still kind of a high interest rate. And he's like, you are a tough negotiator. And he's like, this is the best I could do. I can't do any better than this. What if I lower the interest rate down to this? Okay, so you get this lower price, you get this interest. You're killing me here. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I'm going to tell the kids. I can't bring them gifts for their birthday, you know. But okay, so we're going to get them this price and we'll get this interest rate and you get all the freebies that we promised you. Is that enough for you? And he's doing this. And I was like, well, so I get it at that price and that interest rate? He's like, yeah. And I said, I still get my free show tickets and the steak dinner over at whatever. And it's like, yeah. And I was like, well, I'm also staying at the Luxor. I was staying at the Luxor at the time. I was like, you know, I got Carrot Top doing a comedy show in my hotel. If you can get me some tickets to the Carrot Top comedy show as well. And I'm here in Vegas for 3 more days and it's August and it is hot. My sneakers are melting to the ground. If you could get me a rental car for the next 3 days that has working air conditioning and you cover the cost on that, the Carrot Top tickets and the other stuff you promised me, and at this price and this interest rate, I'll buy it. And the guy was like, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't do that. We can't, we don't do that. I'm like, then I'm not interested. And he's like, well, hold on. Let me see what I could do for you. And the guy leaves the room and he's gone for a while, comes back in, and he's like, hold on, I'm working on it. And every now and then he was checking in with me, like every 15 minutes or so. He's like, hold on, I'm working. Don't relax, I'm working on it. And then he comes back in because I told him, I said, listen, I don't want any mail-in vouchers for anything because I don't know when I'm coming back here, if I'm coming back. I was like, so I want, you know, I want those tickets that I could use now. I don't want to have to mail in and get them so I could come back a later date to go to the shows and get the steak dinners. I want that stuff now. So I was even a little tougher than even most clients that he has. So the guy came back in and he's like, okay, so here we go. I got you your free show tickets that, and I got you the tickets for the steak dinners. And actually here, I got you an extra one. And you wanted the comedy show tickets for Carrot Top in your hotel. Here, I got you 2 tickets for that as well. And the rental car's on its way. So when I got home after my vacation, I opened up this, the storm door, and right in there was a FedEx envelope sitting there waiting for me. It was all my timeshare sales it was the sales contract that I bought when I was in Vegas. Keep in mind, I didn't have to put down any money, didn't give him a credit card. I just signed my life away on it, right? But I knew that I had a 7-day right of rescission. So before I even unpacked my luggage, I opened up that FedEx package. The document on the top of it was my right of rescission, which I promptly signed and included in a self-addressed stamped FedEx envelope, and I mailed it back to them, canceling my timeshare purchase. I never bought it. So I got a lot of stuff out of this guy. I negotiated from him. But I was just testing his negotiation skills, and I got a lot more out of it than what normal people do. I got the rental car, I got some extra comedy show tickets, and I got my stuff right then and there I could use, Don't hate the player, just hate the game, I just played him better, So, unfortunately for him, I did not buy that timeshare. And that's what we got here is that 7-day right of rescission, right? A timeshare buyer has the right to cancel a timeshare contract up to 7 days after signing the contract. Now, I went into it knowing that. So that's the only reason why I agreed to buy it. I wasn't planning on buying a timeshare. So I had no problem signing it there to get the hell out of that office and get my free stuff. But anything that he offered me for free, he had to offer genuinely free with no strings attached. I negotiated some extra things out of them that they normally don't do. And then I signed it. I signed off that I was canceling it. So
I'm sorry, is that for new construction only?
New construction only gives that 7-day right of rescission. Yep, they were still building it. They took me to the property, but it was still under construction. Now, time sharing is a form of shared ownership. Okay, it could be for a week, 2 weeks, a month. I've even seen timeshare sales on cruise ships where they would sell you the cabin on a cruise ship where you could have as timeshare. Those ones were a month at a time, though. Okay, so the penalties for licensees who violate timeshare sales laws. The minimum fine is $250 with a maximum of $50,000 per offense. And this is for the out-of-state subdivided land and timeshare sales. Now, I got a couple videos for you to explain to you about timeshares and how they work.
If you bought a timeshare for your family, by now you've learned the ugly truth. Timeshares are the only thing that you can buy that you don't know how much it's going to cost or when it's going to end. It's like giving them a blank check for annual maintenance and assessment fees. Sounds crazy, right? The ugly truth is that this never ends. Hello, I'm Chuck McDowell, and 10 years ago, I founded Wesley Financial Group with one goal in mind, helping good folks just like you cancel their timeshare contract. And what that means for you and your family, no more mortgage payments, no more maintenance fee surprises, and no more timeshare. So call today.
You get that, LaShwana?
Yeah.
That's Wesley
If you bought a
Financial.
timeshare for your family,
Hold on.
by now
Let's see if I can pull up his phone number for you. Maybe you could even give him a call. Although it could take a while to get out of it. But this guy was one of the first to create these timeshare cancellation companies. So I guess that they're good at it, you know. So they made a business out of it. He actually used to be in timeshare sales, and he saw what a big scam it was, and how it hurt a lot of people. So he started this company on helping people get out of them, and he was sued in federal court and beat the timeshare companies. So now he actually made a business out of it. So here's their phone number if you want it. That
I founded Wesley.
800-559 or 559-4141. 800-559-4141. That's Wesley Financial for you. There's other companies out there too. But this he was the first one that did it, you know, so may want to reach out to him. I don't know. I don't personally recommend anybody. I'm just assuming that he's good at his job here. And these other videos that I'm going to show you now about timeshares and teach you the insides of how they work. This was created by his company as well. Hold on. Let me, before I put on these videos, let me minimize all of ours so that it runs smoother.
We have a consumer warning to tell you about this afternoon for anyone who's trying to sell a timeshare.
Probably heard horror stories of folks going into a timeshare sales pitch and being stuck there for hours.
The maintenance fees were going up 12.5% every single year.
This is the Great American Timeshare Scam. Like most bad things, timeshare started out with really good intentions. But greed, deception, and manipulation has distorted this once creative tool that helped families vacation and turned it into a lifetime of debt for millions of families. In the 60s and 70s, timeshare was a brand new, innovative way to fund property development. And for a while, the system worked. Resorts popped up everywhere, with families owning fixed-week timeshares at a reasonable cost. So what changed? Timeshare companies became obsessed with the bottom line. Profits, money, commissions. Oh my. And now, this steal of a deal, own your vacation, you just bought a house scheme is bribing people to attend sales meetings and deceiving families into a loan that can never be repaid. Thanks for watching. This was actually just part one of a 3-part series on the most deceptive practices within the timeshare industry. If you're interested in learning more, watch part 2, the dark psychology of the timeshare sales meeting. In that video, we go over the manipulative and dishonest tools the timeshare salesmen use to make the sale, to make you buy. Spoiler alert, it's not a sales pitch, it's a show.
And it is a show. So next slide, I'm going to show you that. Hold on one second. As I run this one, I'm going to do a quick bathroom break too while I leave this video playing for you. So hold on one second. And here you go.
You own your house. Why wouldn't you own your vacation? Deals like this come once in a lifetime, and you won't have access to it once you step out of this meeting.
If you've ever sat through a timeshare presentation, you've likely heard this phrase or something like it before. This technique is called the exploding offer, or what is more commonly known as FOMO. And unfortunately, it's not the only technique they're using on you to make the deal. This is the dark psychology of the timeshare sales meeting. So, how do people find themselves in awful timeshare situations? Simple. Timeshare salesmen understand humanity's dark psychology. For example,
if you don't do this now, this deal may run out and be gone forever.
What does your brain instinctively want to do now that you've heard this?
Do it before it's too late.
This tactic is known as the scarcity effect. Scarcity pushes people to make impulsive decisions like buying up all the toilet paper during a global pandemic because...
What if we run out of all the toilet paper?
Right. Very rational. We're not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, but generally a feeling of regret follows impulse buys. Stop me if you know it. Buyer's remorse. Another example is the law of reciprocity, where people feel obligated to stay for the sales meeting because they were given free tickets to an event or a free dinner. This is why they... Watch the glass. This is why they bribe people to come to the sales presentation, because it makes people feel like they should give back their time in exchange for these gifts. And these are just a few examples of the dark psychology timeshare salesmen use. They are masters of persuasion. This is why it's so important to be aware of the psychological influences that affect decision making. That way, you never find yourself in a timeshare presentation to begin with.
Ready for vacations for life?
Keep on walking, pal. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned. You just finished part 2 of our 3-part series on the deceptive practices to look out for in the timeshare industry. The next video is the timeshare contract. In that video, we go over why the timeshare companies will pressure you into that first sale, because once they've got you, they're not going to let you go, at least not without a fight.
Yep, that is true. So hang tight for that.
You own your...
one.
Timeshare's an investment. You'll be able to rent it out. You'll be able to travel anywhere you want for life. This is the timeshare contract. I'm gonna save you the heartache and explain why the timeshare companies try so hard to sell you timeshare. Because the first sale is just the beginning of the ultimate con that's about to destroy your finances. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit. If they can convince you to buy a timeshare, they're guaranteed consistent yearly income without having to give you anything but imaginary points. What a deal for the timeshare company, right? Free maintenance paid for by you for their property that they actually own. They're called maintenance fees, and they go up every single year. A big fat commission because timeshare barely costs the company anything. Seriously, sometimes that salesperson is getting over 30%. And get this, once they've got you, it's nearly impossible to get out. If you try to cancel, they'll tell you they can't do anything. You signed a contract. They may even tell you to sell it yourself. They definitely won't buy it back. They don't want it, and they know it has no value. But if you try to sell it, it turns out no one else actually wants to buy it either. Spoiler alert, there is no market for timeshare resales. None, zero, zilch, nil market for it. Look at this eBay listing for a timeshare. For $1. We've even seen people offer gift cards to take their timeshare. No, I'm good, man.
But it's an investment.
Get out of here! What's crazier is that these timeshares still won't sell, so families are stuck in the timeshare scam, paying all their outrageous fees. And then, when they finally had enough, they're out more money for another service to help them get rid of it. Now, hypothetically, hang with me here, let's say you actually did get that timeshare sold. This means someone else now has your timeshare, which is perfect, right? You no longer have to deal with this financial burden. But there could be a catch, and we've seen this happen over and over. If the person who bought your timeshare stops paying and the timeshare company comes calling, guess who could be on the hook for all of that debt? Yep, the original owner of the timeshare. Oh, shh. And I say this to really show you how hard getting out of a timeshare is. There are plenty of other stories and examples of this kind of unfortunate situation, but I think you get the sad point. Oftentimes, once an owner has tried a couple different avenues to get out, they begin to lose hope. This is what the timeshare companies count on. They want you to sit down, shut up, and pay them your money without actually getting anything in return. They seem more like a mafia than a reputable business.
I'm going to sell you a timeshare you can't refuse.
But thankfully, you don't have to be hopeless. It seems like one of the only ways you can actually cancel your timeshare and all its related debt and fees is through a timeshare exit company. It isn't easy, and it can take up to 3 years, but it is possible. The only caveat per se is that it needs to be a reputable company. There are a few good ones out there, but as these timeshare exit companies have gotten bigger, the timeshare companies have actually started suing them into oblivion. We know this for a fact because they sued us too, but we beat them in federal court for the right to help people like you get relief from the burden of the never-ending lies and fees. This video series only scratches the surface on the most deceptive practices within the timeshare industry. If you want more videos like this, hit that like button. And if you have experienced any of these tactics yourself, tell your story below. It helps people understand that they are not alone, and the situation they found themselves in is nothing to be embarrassed about. Also, if you haven't seen the other videos in this series yet, make sure to check out The Great American Timeshare Scam and The Dark Psychology of the Timeshare Meeting. What you discover may shock you.
Yep. So, what do you think? Was that pretty informative there? That timeshare sale, from the sales pitches to all the information that you learned there? Lashwana, does that bring back memories?
It do bring back memories, and it's very informative. I wish I knew that beforehand, that you could cancel within a certain time frame.
Yep, 7 days.
Yeah, I know that.
Yep, but now you can contact timeshare cancellation company, and they could help you get out of it too if you really want to get out of it. Because they tell you, you got to look through the contract. Even if you manage to sell it to someone, if they stop making their monthly payments, well, you could be on the hook for them still.
The person that is utilizing the timeshare right now, they're pretty okay with it. They like it. So if as long as they continue to do what they're supposed to do, it is fine by me. And so far, no problems. And it's been, 2+ years now.
Okay. So as long as they're paying the bills. All right. Here's a few common architectural styles we need to familiarize ourselves with. Being real estate agents, you need to familiarize yourself with architectural styles. It's one of the things that when you get a listing and you put it in the MLS, you need to point out the types of architectural styles. That's one of the things you need to check off on the box. What type of house is it? So I put together this list for you here. It's a bunch of the architectural styles that we find commonly in New Jersey. I'm working on putting together a good list of architectural styles with pictures on them too, to show you what they look like. But here are some common styles that we see here in New Jersey. Cape Cods. I live in one. That's a Cape Cod style house, but there's several styles of Cape Cod houses too. Colonials, Victorians, ranches, raised ranch, bungalow, split level, Tudor, contemporary, bi-level, townhouse, a duplex. It's a 2-family side by side or an over-under 2-family. Art Deco, Craftsman, Saltbox, Dutch Colonial, Federal, Georgian, Monterey, Gothic, Greek, Pueblo, Queen Anne, apartment buildings, and high-rises. These are some of the architectural styles that you're going to come across here in New Jersey. The Realtors Magazine, they put together an architectural style guide for us too, with some cartoonish drawings of the architectural styles, as you could see here. They put together a little guide here for us and explains to you the different architectural styles. It ain't great, but it's better than nothing. Okay. They got a bunch of different architectural styles here now with those drawings. Now they also have architectural and structural elements too that will show you like the different types of arches above windows, different styles of columns if the house has columns, different types of dormers that go into the roofs, you know, the windows stick out there, different types of moldings, different types of roof styles. And different types of window casings. The bay, the bow, the box bay, casement windows, double hung, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so I'm actually working on putting together a nice architectural style guide for you guys. So if you haven't yet, I suggest you go to Facebook and like our page. I'm going to put it up there on the on our Facebook page, but I'm also going to put it on our website. But I will post it on our Facebook page. So it's facebook.com/Career Path Academy. All right, so go there, like us, love us. Not only do I give free giveaways, but I also do posts periodically from stuff about the news, things that are real estate related. And I am working on this. I already started it. About halfway through with it right now. I'm putting together a nice comprehensive architectural style guide because I can't seem to find one out there that's really good to teach people. This is better than nothing, so I'll share this with you for now. That's the Realtors Magazine Architectural Style Guide. And then, once again, our Facebook page, facebook.com/Career Path Academy. No spaces. Okay. And go there, like us and love us, and I'll make some posts there. You can even look through some of the humorous posts and videos that I made. Some good stuff there. All right. That ends this slideshow. That ends chapter 7. Let's do the key terms to review, and we're already at the end of the day. So there are 2 key terms to review, so let's make haste, shall we? Ownership. In key terms 1.
13.
Ownership.
Title.
Title is another word for ownership. 13 is A. Default form of ownership for those who are unmarried and not in a civil union.
Tenancies in common.
Tenants in common. Yep. 11 is B. A person named in a will to inherit real estate.
Devisee.
A devisee. Correct. 2 is C. A group with each partner completely liable.
General partnership.
Yes. General partnership. 3 is D. Non-married person with the right of survivorship.
Joint tenancy.
Yep, joint tenancy. 4 is E. Business owned by one person or entity.
Sole proprietorship.
9 is F, correct. Co-owners join together to carry on a business.
G.
I'm sorry? Yeah, partnership. 7 is G. Court-ordered sale and division.
Partition.
Yep, 6 is H. Legal entity considered to be an artificial person.
Corporation.
Corporation, 1 is I. Process by which a co-owner automatically receives the share of a co-owner who dies.
Right to survivorship.
Yes, 8 is J. Special ownership by married couples.
Tenancy by the entirety.
Yes, 10 is K. Real estate ownership by only one.
Tenancy and severalty.
Yes, 12 is L. And group with only one general partner fully liable.
Limited partnership.
Group with only general partner fully liable. Yes, limited partnership. 5 is M. Correct. All right, key terms 2 on the next page. Co-op owners' right to a specific apartment.
Proprietary lease.
Yep, that's what gives you the right to occupy the unit that you're living in. 8 is A. Group elected to manage a cooperative.
Board of Directors.
1 is B, the Board of Directors. An architectural term.
Townhouse.
11 is C. Stairwells, roofs, etc. that are owned by everybody. These are known as?
Common elements.
Yes. 2 is D. Apartment whose buyer receives a proprietary lease and stock in the corporation.
A co-op.
Co-op.
Cooperative.
Cooperative or co-op for short. Yes. 5 is E. Fee simple ownership of living unit. Fee simple ownership of living unit. It's a condominium. 3 is F. All owners in one condominium complex, they're all going to be...
Homeowners Association.
They're going to be part of the homeowners association. 6 is G, to which all will belong, right? Apartment house changed to condos.
Conversion.
It's a conversion. 4 is H. Money set aside for future repairs.
Reserves.
Reserves. 9 is I. Ownership for part of a year.
Timeshare.
Time sharing. Yep. 10 is J. And regulates the creation of condominiums.
Horizontal Properties Act.
7 is K, the Horizontal Properties Act. And that concludes Chapter